Welcome to Incognito Islamic Productions. Consider Islam Disproving the Patriots of Propaganda. Introduction. Without Islam, submission to God, I am incapable of maneuvering through this world and all of the obstacles that it presents. I can't do it. I've tried, I've failed. The continuous return to prayer 5 times each day and the continuous remembrance of Allah, blessed and exalted is He, has been vital in my ability to cope with some exceedingly difficult events that have transpired in my life. No, I have not always lived in the obedience of Allah, but in His wisdom and mercy, He calls people back to Him through various tests and trials that have caused me to look at life with a whole new understanding. It has caused me to realize how precious time is. Time is like ice melting away. My intention for this book is to defend Islam against falsehoods and misconceptions that have been used to tarnish this way of life, which is a true source of peace and comfort for those who have humbled themselves. It is not my intention to offend any individual or group with anything that I say. My objective is to present information to the reader that will cause them to realize that what has been presented to them about Islam may or may not be true, as antagonists fervently and routinely make false and wrong claims. Islam is demonized using news broadcasts, social media, movies, radio, podcasts, 30-second sound bites, and headlines, which are used to shift and shape the beliefs of the masses. Many fallacious claims are made about Islam by hate mongers who hide their hatred behind a veil of freedom of speech. This book is a defense against those who utilize valuable time and resources in order to tarnish Islam, as well as Muslims all over the world who face the unprovoked hatred daily. There are some in the world who label themselves as Muslims who have been led astray by people seeking to achieve their agendas, but those people by no means represent the true followers of Islam. I am simply asking the reader to balance the scales and to consider what is presented fairly in order to decipher for oneself what Islam is while rejecting what it is not. I'm asking people to be readers instead of repeaters by encouraging them to sincerely seek out the truth through legitimate research instead of relying upon others to feed them information. Living in the era of fake news and social media makes us all victims of mass marketing techniques that are not limited to products that are being sold. Ideologies, philosophies, religions, and politics are also being manufactured, marketed, and sold to people on a large scale. It would be naive to assume that people holding the power of persuasion are not sometimes motivated by ill intent in their motives and practices. With that in mind, I welcome the reader and I encourage you to consider Islam based on your own sincere desire for the truth. Truth is the truth even if no one believes it, and a lie is a lie even if everyone believes it. When seeking truth, we must ask ourselves, am I seeking truth or am I looking for comfort? While realizing that truth isn't always comfortable. We must face the reality that if we're simply looking for what is comfortable, we may not find the truth. Writing this book may be the most important thing I ever do in my life. Today is the most important day of our lives because yesterday has come and gone and tomorrow may never arrive. May Allah accept my efforts. Ameen. The Quran states, truth has now arrived and falsehood has perished. For falsehood, by its nature, is bound to perish. Surah Al-Isra, chapter 17, verse 81. Okay, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon everyone who's watching and listening. My name is Kenny Bomer. I'm the author of the book Consider Islam Disproving the Patriots of Propaganda. And this is Kenny Bomer Live. Consider this TV where truth is made clear from falsehood. And I do bear witness there's no God other than Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his final servant and the seal of all prophets. Before we go any further, I want to shout out to one of my sponsors for Consider This TV, which is Viet Slam. Go to vietslam.com. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be posting a link for their GoFundMe. They're trying to get the funds for the next 3 months for the masjid. Then trying to raise $6,000 for the next 3 months of the masjid. And this is a masjid in Deer Park, Texas. Once again, this is a little bit of history about this masjid. This is was established by Brother Hamza Bui, and who is a Vietnamese revert to Islam. And so this particular masjid is very active in trying to reach out to the Vietnamese community. Of course, everyone's welcome, alhamdulillah, but Viet Slam is particularly trying to reach out to the Vietnamese community. And I will be posting the GoFundMe link in the chat. Matter of fact, I'm going to do that right now as we speak. So this is the GoFundMe for Viet Slam. And inshallah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that for a person to help establish a masjid, to build a masjid, that Allah will build a like house in paradise for those individuals. So this is a great means for Sadaqat Jariyah for anyone who gives for the sake of Allah. And you also receive perpetual blessings for everyone who steps into that masjid. You can pay the bills for the masjid, alhamdulillah. You also receive blessings for anyone who steps into the masjid. And so I do encourage everyone to give for the sake of Allah, and to go to that GoFundMe that I just posted in the YouTube channel and the Facebook groups. And I do ask you to subscribe, like, and share to these channels. I also want to shout out to another affiliate, which is Incognito Islamic Productions. Go to that YouTube channel and subscribe there. The brother's doing brilliant work there. So Viet Slam and Incognito Islamic Productions, shout out to both of those. Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you brothers associated with those groups for your intentions. So we have a big discussion coming up today regarding Deuteronomy 18:18 with Brother Nadir Ahmed. I'm bringing him onto the panel right now, and also Chris Claus. So I welcome both gentlemen to the show. And Chris, you may need to unmute your mic over there, but I do welcome you brothers to the show. Once again, we're going to be discussing the topic, a prophet like Moses, regarding the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 18. So I believe we're going to be doing a 3-minute back and forth, and at some point we'll open up to questions and answers, maybe more of an open discussion at some point. So if anyone's listening right now and you're trying to get into the panel, I'm trying to limit the activity in the panel to just these two brothers right now, so that they can engage in this discussion one-on-one without distractions. And so assalamu alaikum, Brother Nadir and Chris. Welcome to the platform once again. And so anything you brothers want to say before we officially get started with this?
Oh, well, just welcome Chris for, very nice discussion. I think he has had a chance to look at some of the discussions I had with Samuel Green, Michael Brown. So he should be pretty familiar with the topic. We're just a very casual discussion. I believe we're first going to talk about a couple of subtopics. The first one is, how is Jesus like Moses? Then we'll move on to how Muhammad is like Moses. Then we'll open it up for other issues maybe Chris would like to raise. So that's going to be the format of our discussion.
Okay, so I want to say assalamu alaikum to Brother Mukit Khan, MI5 Dunya, Brother Ibn Anwar, Yusuf, everyone who's watching right now. Alhamdulillah, thank you, brothers, for watching. I do once again. I want to repeat. I want to mention Viet Slam once again before we actually get started. And I did post the GoFundMe link for the masjid there for anyone who's watching. Any little bit helps, inshallah. So they're trying to get the bills paid for the next 3 months. So please click on that GoFundMe link for Viet Slam, and inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for your intentions. And if nothing more, submit your prayers, inshallah. So, okay, so if you brothers are ready to go, I think we're going to do a 3-minute back and forth. I'm simply going to moderate the discussion, try to keep time, and let you brothers carry forth with the affirmative and the negative position. So regarding, well, we're going to figure out what who's who and what's what in this discussion. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets the truth be told in this discussion, inshallah, and He blesses everyone for our intentions. So, Chris, are you there, brother?
Yeah, I'm here, Kay.
Okay.
I was under the understanding that we were just going to speak about Deuteronomy 18:18, and just have a 3-minute back and forth. That's
Right.
pretty much what we talked about, right, Nadir?
Yeah.
Right. So basically, Deuteronomy 18 says, I will raise up a prophet like unto thee, referring to Moses. So the question is, okay, well, is it Jesus or is it Muhammad? Who could be like Moses? So the first topic we're going to talk for maybe about 10 minutes, or yeah, right around 10 minutes, we could do that. How is Jesus like Moses? Then how is Muhammad like Moses? And then we'll open it up for any other issues.
Okay, so let's do this in the midst of the conversation. So we're gonna, if we go point by point, let's make sure for that first interlude that we're talking about Jesus being like Moses, peace be upon them both, and let's stick to that topic, and then we'll keep going. That way, we're not getting bundled up with a bunch of different arguments all at the same time. Inshallah, we can pin down certain points. And
right.
So who's going to open up, brothers?
I can go first if you like.
Okay. So Nadir, when you're ready, I'll set the timer for you.
Sure.
Again, it'll be 3 minutes, and I'll make if your brothers want me to give you an indicator at about maybe the 15-second mark, I'll make a little tap. I'm sure you probably heard that, I would assume. Did y'all hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll just at the 15-second mark, and then we'll that'll give you time to tie up your point. And so okay. So Nadir, when you're ready, we'll pick it up and go ahead and proceed.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you, Chris, for joining on this discussion, and I hope to clear up a lot of the, maybe a lot of misunderstandings, which we may both have. So I guess the first thing we're going to talk about is, how is Jesus like Moses? Now, the New Testament does make the claim that it was Jesus who was the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18. However, others have disagreed with that in the Bible. Like, for example, inside 1 John chapter 1, verse 21, they asked John the Baptist 3 questions. Are you the Christ? Are you Elijah? And then they asked him, are you that prophet? Which is referring to Deuteronomy 18:18. So not everyone, I believe, is in agreement on that. So the Quran also makes this claim, which alludes to the fact that Muhammad is a prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18. It said, I will raise up a prophet like unto you, like unto Moses. What I want to point out here is Jesus is not like Moses. And even though the Bible does claim that, but the Bible writers were in error in saying that. They tried to present many similarities between Jesus and Moses, like, for example, both of them fasted for 40 days. Both of them, they both visited Egypt. And the problem with this is that that's not what it means to be like somebody. I mean, when you say you are like someone, you're talking about their intrinsic characteristics, like unique characteristics. Like, for example, Donald Trump is a very, unique. Some of the unique characteristics of him is that he is a billionaire. He is a person. He's made billions in the real estate industry. Now, that's a very unique characteristic. And if I did something like that, well, then I can say I'm like Donald Trump. This is what it means to be like somebody, where you share his unique characteristics and attributes. And some other things, Donald Trump, he speaks what's on his mind. He doesn't care about being politically correct, and he gets in trouble for doing that. If I were to do something like that, yeah, that guy's a little bit like Donald Trump. So this is what it means to be like. And when we look at Jesus and we look at Moses, Jesus has no unique characteristics of Moses, nothing. And so the Bible writers, they try to present these things. Well, they both went to Egypt. They both did miracles with water. One turned water to wine, one turned water to blood. But that's not a unique characteristic. So the question which I want to raise with Chris is this true? Is there anything which is unique, a unique characteristic which Moses and Jesus had? And so, and when we ask that, I don't think we're going to find any, but with Muhammad, we are going to find many. And so that is why we believe that it's actually Muhammad who is the fulfillment of the prophecy.
Okay, brother, that was your 3 minutes. Okay, Chris, so whenever you're ready, when you start talking, I'll go ahead and start your 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much, Nadir, and to Kenny as well. first off, I'd like to pray, dear God, please use me as a vessel to be able to speak your word truthfully and to be able to glorify you solely. And then through this debate, I pray that just one person comes to the knowledge of the saving grace of Christ. And I pray this in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, when we get talking about Deuteronomy 18:18, and Nadir throws the category it could only be Muhammad and or Jesus, he's limiting the scope of what Deuteronomy 18 is actually stating. So what we actually do is we have to go back to Deuteronomy to find out what this is about. All right. So what this is about the Israelites in Horeb on Mount Sinai. And when God was speaking to them, and they just couldn't bear to hear God, and they asked God to send them prophets so that they didn't have to hear him anymore. So this stems from them. Then also, I'd like to also state that within the verse that we're speaking about, there's a certain phrase, and I know that Nadir was debating Dr. Michael Brown and never did actually address this, and it says, from among your brethren, or from among you. That phrase, from among you or from among your brethren, is used 13 times and is always addressed to the Israelites, never to a foreign people other than the Israelites. Now, when we get into speaking about, is Jesus like Muhammad? Of course he is. Now, what Nadir's going to do is he's going to say that there's certain things and there's certain things, whatever. Now, my main two things that I'm going to push forward for is the reason why Jesus is like Moses, is because of what Deuteronomy actually says. This prophet to be like Moses must show the signs and wonders as Moses showed. This prophet that would be like Moses would also know God face to face. With just using those two criterion alone, if Nadir only wants to use Jesus and Muhammad, then we can say that it can only be Jesus and it cannot be Muhammad. The reason for that is Muhammad does not know God face to face. God sent his revelation down through an angel. So that's not God's face to face interaction with Muhammad. Also, signs and wonders is Muhammad never actually did the signs and wonders that we see that Moses done. And we see that Jesus did do these signs and wonders, and he knew God face to face. How much time do I have left, Kenny?
You have 10 seconds.
X, I'll just end it there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Nadir, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so all the stuff about the Israelites can only mean the brethren. Did God know, did Muhammad know God face to face? All these are wonderful objections. We will address them, but I believe what our first 10 minutes, as we explained to everyone here, we are talking about how Jesus is like Moses. So that's what we need to talk about for about 10 minutes there, and then we can definitely go into all these other topics which you are raising. So I want you to take about 10 seconds of my time because you didn't address the question which was asked. Chris, is there any unique characteristics which both Moses and Jesus share, which you know of? Take about 20 seconds
Yes,
of
sir.
my time. Okay.
Yes, sir. It's the signs and wonders they both did, and knowing God face to face.
Okay, so that is not an attribute. Okay, an attribute is something like I showed you, like Trump he's a brilliant, or you could say he's made billions in the real estate industry. So he has the ability to make billions of dollars in the real estate attribute. So you're talking about things which they both did, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking a unique attribute. Go take some more of my time and see if you can find any attributes between them.
Well, again, you can take your 3 minutes, Nadir, but I reject your definition of what is to be like Moses. It's
Okay.
defined, and that's what I said. My 3 minutes.
What it means to be like Moses, we might have a different understanding. But the question whether it's okay, let's say you have your definition of what it means to be like Moses, and we'll definitely go there. We'll definitely address that. But the question which I'm raising to you, whether you see it as being relevant or not, is there any characteristics, unique characteristics, which Jesus and Moses share? Go ahead. Could you answer that for me?
Again, yes, they both had signs and miracles, and they both had a relationship with God face to face. So again, I reject your definition. You have 3 minutes. Continue it, please, sir.
Oh, okay. So those are not attributes. Those are not characteristics. If you say they both did miracles, Muhammad did miracles too. But that's really not an attribute. And that's what I was trying to point out. If you look at the life of Jesus, and if you look at who Moses was, if you look in terms of their intrinsic characteristics, there is nothing in common between them. And the things you are pointing out, they knew God face to face. This is not an attribute. This is not a characteristic of somebody. But anyway, you're actually mistaken on what the verse actually means, but I'm just kind of letting you get away with it. And that's my point. We are seeing here, and we're really getting into some truth. Oh, I think my time's up, but go ahead.
So I want to remind you gentlemen, I think for the first 10 minutes, we were talking about the attributes of Jesus and how they compare to Moses, peace be upon him. So I just want to give a general reminder to both of you about that. So I think that's what we agreed upon for the first 10 minutes. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, we didn't agree upon talking about the attributes of Jesus and Moses for the first 10 minutes. I have the correspondence with Nadir for that, but I'll continue with my 3 minutes. Now, the thing is, God has told us in Deuteronomy 18:18 that he's going to raise up a prophet like Moses. He defines what like Moses means in the sense as performing miracles and wonders, or signs and wonders, and also having that relationship, knowing God face to face. You can try to say that those don't matter, but that's what the Bible actually defines as being like Moses. So I'm not going to go with your personal interpretation of what Moses is like. I'm going to stick to the scriptures and go by the scriptures and use that to identify what the prophet like Moses would be like. So again, the prophet like Moses would have signs and wonders. Now we see that Jesus, of course, had many signs and wonders. And we can even see that in the Quran. So I don't think that there's a Muslim that would deny that Jesus had signs and wonders. And also, Jesus knew God face to face. Right in John. You quoted John chapter 1 already, so I guess I can quote John as well. Only the Son knows the Father, and he has revealed him. The Word was with God and was God in the beginning, had a face-to-face relationship. So I don't understand where... I guess I'm going to have to wait for your next 3 minutes, because you didn't really say nothing in your last 3 minutes that has anything for a rebuttal. Again, I'm going to stand on the fact that the reason why Deuteronomy 18:18 is mentioned in the first place is because the assembly in Horeb, when the Israelites pleaded to God to send them a prophet so they didn't have to hear his voice. And also the phrase, and you're just going to the word brethren, but there's an actual phrase, among your brethren, or from among you, or from among your brethren. That whole phrase, when used, is only addressed to the Israelites. And another reason, you brought up John 1:26 about them asking John about him being Elijah or the prophet or the Christ or the Messiah or whatever. You're right. They were asking John at that point in time because the people would have known that it was an Israelite prophet that they were waiting for. I don't remember in the Quran the Jews asking Muhammad if he is the prophet, as they asked John. So I'll just go ahead and I'll let my time go at that, and hopefully you've got a little bit more substance, Nadir.
Okay, all right, and you had about 5 seconds left. But let me clarify. I think that I don't know what the correspondence was, but based on what was said at the intro before the discussion began, I believe Nadir had mentioned 10 minutes, and we're going point by point regarding defining how Jesus, peace be upon him, is or is not like Moses, and we proceed to Muhammad and so forth. So I think that's what we discussed. That has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chris, I feel like you're way off topic. because the first 10 minutes we're going to look to see how Jesus and Moses, what similarities they have, and then we're going to talk about Muhammad. The
And
same question.
Nadir, just
Yeah.
pause for 1 second, sir.
Okay.
Can you admit that you never said that to me in our Facebook messages?
I didn't give you any kind of format, anything. No.
Excellent. So you never give me this format of 10 minutes, Jesus, and whatever else. You just basically said that we were going to speak about Deuteronomy 18:18.
Right.
And then near the end of the time, you said you better get ready to speak about Jesus. That's the only talk, right?
Well, I believe I provided you the debate or the discussion with Samuel Green, which goes into all of this. And you said you listened to it. And the second question actually was what we're talking about right now. Are you prepared to talk about this topic, Chris?
Again, I disagree with your debate that you had with Samuel Green, and I'm sure that you remember us already talking about this once. And I've actually talked to Samuel Green about it, and Samuel agrees with what I stated. And even when you were talking with Dr. Brown, Dr. Michael Brown, he even agreed with what I said about the warrior prophet. So yes, I have no problem
Okay.
talking about the Jesus and Moses thing, but we have to keep it in
Okay.
context of what
Yes.
Deuteronomy says.
Okay, so the question so you believe that we use let me just start my 3 minutes then. Okay, so you think that you have a definition of what like Moses is and it performed miracles and know God face to face. This is your own interpretation, which you're actually reading into the text. But that's okay, no problem, because Muhammad also performed miracles, and we went over that in the Samuel Green discussion. But anyway, the question is this, which I was asking you, and this is the third time, and I think it'll be the final time I will ask you. As far as a unique characteristic between Jesus and Moses, a unique characteristic, as I showed you, like Trump, he is a billionaire. He has a unique characteristics of being able to make $1 billion in real estate. This is a very unique characteristic to have. Not everyone has it. Do you know? And I guess you did point out. Okay, well, both Jesus and Moses were miracle workers. Okay, that could be one. That's one. My question is, well, and the reason why that should be discounted, by the way, and should not be looked at, even though that is a characteristic, being a miracle worker, is because Muhammad was also a miracle worker. He also did miracles. So then by that criteria, you have to accept Prophet Muhammad. So if there's characteristics between all three of them, then it actually takes us nowhere. So let me rephrase my question. Do you know of any unique characteristics between Jesus and Moses, which Muhammad doesn't have? Go ahead and take 10 minutes of my time and give me one.
Now, again, I want you to finish your time because I'm going to give you some of my time to read something.
Okay, but that's okay. I want to give you my time so that you can answer the question here, because if there are unique characteristics, we're having a discussion, and so I'd like for you to take my time and take 30 seconds of my time. Go ahead. What's a unique characteristic?
Yeah, as I said, Jesus has the intimate knowledge of knowing God face to face. Muhammad doesn't.
He has the intimate knowledge of knowing God face to face. What does that mean?
That Jesus knows God face to face. Same as Moses, but Muhammad doesn't.
Jesus knows God face to face. That is not an attribute. Okay, so here's my point, and I think that the point has been made. Jesus is, if you look at the characteristics and the qualities of who Jesus and Moses is, they're completely different. They share nothing, no unique attributes, which the two have. But however, when we go and look at Muhammad, we are going to see that they share many of the unique qualities and attributes. Now, the point which you are making about they both know face to face kind of stuff. I would like to. Why don't you explain a little bit more what you mean on that, because it doesn't make any sense from what it sounds like. Go ahead.
Okay. And Chris, you have 3 minutes.
Excellent. So Nadir, can you do me a favor? Can you go to Deuteronomy 34 and can you read verses 10 and through to 12, please, for me?
Yeah, I can definitely show you how you're misreading the text. Let me go ahead and do that. Um, so let me go to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 34. So it says over here, since then, no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, referring to Joshua, whom the Lord knew face to face. Did you see how you misread the text? You are thinking that the other way around, that Jesus
Sir,
knew you
sir,
face to face.
no,
The
I'm
Lord
just
knew you
asking
face to face. There
Nadir,
you go.
Nadir, can
Yeah.
you just read 34,
Mhm.
10 through to 12 without your own interpretation in it, please?
Okay, so let's read it very carefully. In fact, let me go ahead and share my desktop
You're
if I
either
may.
going to read it or I'm going to read it.
Okay, calm down, Chris. I was thinking I would share my desktop because I got the verse right in front of me. So it says over here, whom the Lord knew face to face. And so we need to take that literally. Remember what Chris said. Don't put your own interpretation on that. Who did all the signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt to Pharaoh? So it's not that they just do signs and wonders. Read it
Yeah,
properly.
excellent. So now
Yeah,
can I collect
yeah,
the
go ahead.
rest of my 3 minutes now, Nadir?
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
So Nadir's actually just read Deuteronomy 34, kind of 10 and 12. And what 10 and 12 says is that there's not been a prophet risen like Moses that has did these signs and wonders that God has known face to face. So this is why I went to Deuteronomy 34, is because we have to know what it's like to be like Moses. And God actually gives us the qualifications to be like Moses, and that they person must do signs and wonders, and that God must know them face to face. Now, there are many other similarities between Jesus and Moses, but for the context of right now, I wanted to focus on those. Now, he does say that Muhammad has these miracles and signs, which I don't agree with. He's just said that it has happened. There's actually been no evidence that Muhammad has actually performed any of these miracles or signs. And then also the biggest one is knowing God face to face. Now, if Muhammad does not know God face to face, then it does qualify him from being like Moses. So what we need to do is we need to see if Jesus meets these qualifications and if Muhammad meet these qualifications. If they do, let's go to look at the similarities between them. But until then, let's look at these criterions and develop our answer from there. Thank you.
All right, that was your 3 minutes. Okay, good job.
Okay,
Okay.
let me go ahead and share my desktop over here because I think you're misreading the text. And so I think it's pretty clear, and we've asked you on several occasions, as far as the unique characteristics between Jesus and Moses. And as we see, there are none, zero. And that was a point which we made with Samuel Green as well. He couldn't find any as well.
Okay.
So let me go ahead.
Nadir, is this the same screen that you wanted to share here? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, thank you. So, and so this is my point, that they are, trying to compare. And so I think you say, okay, we have a definition of what it means to be like Moses, but you are misreading the text, and we're going to correct you on that, God willing. But going back to the point, trying to, as we now know, Jesus is nothing like. They share no common attributes or characteristics. But it's worse than that. To compare Jesus with Moses is preposterous. Moses was a man of war. He brutally ordered the acts of genocide to be killed against the Midianites, and he committed terrible atrocities of war. Jesus was nothing like this. But just because, I want to also point out another thing, Chris, and this is a misunderstanding Dr. Brown and everybody has. Just because there's huge differences between Jesus and Moses, that doesn't disqualify him. There's differences between Muhammad, Jesus, and Moses. There's differences between all of them. The differences do not disqualify them. The Bible said, look for the similarities, a prophet like Moses. So let's now go to Deuteronomy 18:18, and I'm going to show you kind of how you're misreading the text. It said, since then, no prophet in Israel has risen like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. What to face? No, it says whom the Lord knew face to face. This is if we take it literally, we know God knows everybody face to face. You also misread the second part. It said, whom did all the signs and wonders, and you stopped here. Read it carefully. Whom did all the signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his officials in the whole land. So what were those miracles? He, of course, the staff he turned into a snake, and it ate up the other snakes. Neither Muhammad or Jesus did any of this. So I think that you're also the third you got three big misinterpretations. You see this as a definition of what it means to be like. That's an interpretation. So you have interpretation of interpretations of interpretations. And this is why we say Muhammad is the one like Moses. Because what Christians present to you are nothing but interpretations of interpretations. What Muslims present to you are facts. And we haven't got to the point yet where we can now talk about Muhammad and Moses. But anyways, go ahead, Chris. I think that's my time.
Yeah, and again, you're not giving me very much to respond to. Never once did I say that the difference is something that disqualifies somebody. Actually, what I did specifically say is that there is a certain criterion, and if both meet that criterion, then we have to look at similarities. So I'm not sure where you're going on the differences, and no, Michael Brown didn't say that. You're just trying to throw that into people's mouths that didn't actually say it. Now, Nadir has stated already that he was going to refute the case that the phrase "from among your brethren" or "from among you" does not solely mean to the Israelites, because in 13 other instances, when that phrase "from among your brethren" or "from among you" is used, it is always used in reference of the Israelites. Always. Nadir has to point out why this is so and why he's changing the definition of this phrase to suit Muhammad in Deuteronomy 18:18. That he's not even tried to refute. The next thing was knowing God face to face. He said that he was going to refute that. Well, what does he do? He reads Deuteronomy 34, 10 to 12, and he says, whom God knew face to face. Speaking about Moses, if we read the sentence, God is saying there has not been anyone that he's known face to face like he did with Moses. And that's it. It doesn't mean everyone has saw God's face. That is a complete lie by Nadir. And he needs to actually respond to this instead of lying to the people that are listening to this in the stream. Next off, we need to find out if we're only talking about Jesus. We've been into this for almost 40 minutes. Well, I think we're going to be cutting it off in 20 minutes and adding other people in from what you said earlier. And I thought we were actually going to talk about if Jesus and or Muhammad, but you've never give any qualifications to anything that I've said. You're just avoiding what I'm saying and completely ripping apart the Bible. You're adding your own interpretations and accusing me of it when I'm reading the words word for word. And it's the same thing you did to Dr. Michael Brown, who is a Hebrew scholar of the Old Testament studies. And furthermore, Mustafa Ahmed was talking about Isaiah 53 with Jay, a friend of mine, saying that he needed to know Hebrew if he's going to argue these scriptures. Would you agree with that stance as well, that you must know Hebrew to be able to argue this? And if not, would you say that Mustafa was wrong? And I'll allow you to answer that during your 3 minutes. But we need to get this back to if Jesus or Muhammad meets the criterion developed in Deuteronomy 34, 10 to 12. And yes, Jesus does, and no, Muhammad doesn't.
Okay. All right, Chris, and that was your 3 minutes. Okay, Nadir?
Okay, thank you, Chris. So basically, you're right. I'm avoiding a lot of what you're saying, and here's the reason why. It's all off topic. Talking about brethren and these other issues, I needed to pin you down on accepting the fact that there are no unique characteristics between Jesus and Moses. And I believe that has been established tonight. I hope you can at least bring yourself to start seeing the truth. And we've given you ample time to produce that. So, yeah, so because I was trying to pin you down and trying to get you to see this, all this other stuff you're bringing up, I was avoiding. I can start addressing some of it now. And so, why is Muhammad the prophet of Moses? See, in Chris, you are going to see why Christianity is not true. All he is presenting to you are interpretations of interpretations of interpretations. I'm presenting to you fact. What's the fact? Fact number one, there are no unique characteristics between Jesus and Moses. None. Rather, it is preposterous to try to compare the two. It's like comparing Joseph Stalin with Mother Teresa. That's how silly it is. But as I said, just because there's differences doesn't mean that they don't have any unique similarities. But we already know this is probably not going to work for Chris and what the Christians are bringing. It is silly and preposterous to compare Jesus and Moses. Moses was a killer. He killed and committed acts of a genocide. He inside Numbers chapter 31, verse 18, he said, kill all the men, women, and children. Oh, and the little girls who are virgins, you can keep them for yourself. Is that like Jesus? And now you're comparing that with a person like Jesus who says, put down the sword, for he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. So as I'm saying, so we already probably knew there were not going to be any similarities between the two, and that is exactly what we found. Now, let us look at this web of interpretations, which I believe Chris is giving here tonight on Deuteronomy chapter 10. It says over here, it's talking about Joshua, the son of Nun. It says, since then, no prophet has arisen like Moses. Who is this referring to? It's talking about Joshua. And as I showed inside the commentary as Dr. Brown, what precedes after that, it is simply a praise of Moses. Now, that's an interpretation. So you could read this two different ways. You can see this as a continuation of what the likeness means, or you could see this as a praise, which is actually what is found in the commentaries. Why? Because if you read what it says, whom the Lord knew face to face. In fact, this is a question I want to ask you, Chris. Does it say whom the Lord? Can you see my desktop, Chris?
There it is. That was your 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. So it says the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah, the Lord knew face to face doesn't mean that the messenger has to see him face to face. I think you might be misinterpreting that. Go ahead.
Okay, and so it's Chris's 3 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Chris. You there, Chris?
Yeah, again.
Okay.
Nadir said that he was going to refute what I said. Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You guys can hear me? I'm good?
Yes, yes.
All right. So Nadir said that he was going to refute me, and he did not. I'm not going to take 3 minutes here because it's not going to. He's trying to say that he's not going to refute me on the phrase "from among your brethren" because it has nothing to do with it. Our problem is that's the phrase used in Deuteronomy 18:18. So if it has nothing to do with it, Nadir, then why are we even talking about it? Next off, if we wanted to still talk about the criterion that I developed in Deuteronomy 34:10-12, where it does actually say, like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, it actually stating there that the Lord knew Moses face to face. He actually spoke face to face with Moses. And this is what it's meaning to give the criterion to be like Moses. So did Jesus ever speak with God face to face? The answer is yes. Did Muhammad ever speak to God face to face? The answer is no. This is why, and this is how we can know who the prophet is. What you do is you go to these certain type of non-specific characteristics between Muhammad and Moses and say, see, they're the same person. But the problem is we could do that with every other prophet known to man. Like Moses and Muhammad are not the only ones that ever went into war, right? So therefore, that cancels that out, because that can be any prophet. And this is the one thing that Muslims don't understand, is they try to go to unspecific attributes and characteristics of these two people to be able to show some type of similarities, because they can't go to the criterion set out in Deuteronomy 34:10-12, because they know Muhammad did not know God face to face, and he did not do the signs and wonders. And they would have to acknowledge that Jesus did do the signs and wonders, and that he did know God face to face. Therefore, the prophet, like Moses, would have to be Jesus and could not be Muhammad. Again, that will be my 3 minutes, only because Nadir refuses to try to address anything that I've said, other than saying it's just a interpretation.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks, Chris. So you keep going back that Muhammad. Did you say Muhammad never did any signs and wonders, no miracles? Is that what you're saying, Chris? Did you say
Yes,
that?
sir. He did not do any signs and wonders.
So this is very interesting. You see, what the Christians are doing now, you are aware that the Hadith have many miracles of Prophet Muhammad. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, but to be perfectly honest, though, if there's nothing mentioned in the Quran about it,
Mhm.
the Hadith is basically second, third, and fourth hand stories and can't be held as truthful.
Okay, so we have in front of you many miracles which Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did inside, did, and it's all inside the Hadith. Now, notice what the case of Christianity is. They have to burn the history of Islam. Did you see that? They have to reject and deny the Hadith history. However, this is a hoodwinkle, because right after this discussion is over, they're all going to jump into the Hadith, including Chris, and they will use that to refute the Muslims. And they will use, in fact, I think 90% of what they debate with Muslims is in Hadith. So this is hypocrisy. This is also very fascinating. Why do you have to burn the history of Islam to prove Jesus? Did you see that? He has to, and we're talking not about a couple of books here, we're talking about millions of pages. I mean, this is so preposterous. That means when you go into the 8th grade classroom, they have a section which teaches on Islam. You literally have to rip pages out of there to make Jesus the prophet like Moses. This is nonsense. Do not burn the history of Christianity. Do not burn the history of Islam. Let's take it and let's see what it says. All Muslims, we know and we believe Muhammad did many signs and wonders. Now, going back to Deuteronomy chapter 34, you said that I want to refute you. No, I don't want to refute you. I'm trying to get you to understand, Chris. First thing is, there's no unique attributes between Jesus and Moses. Also, I want to show you how you might be misreading Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 10. It says, since then, no prophet has arisen like Moses. You said, this is the criteria. The criteria for what it means to be like Moses is that you have to know God face to face. So my question, can you read the text here for me? This says, whom the Lord knew face to face. Or does the text says, whom the prophet knew face to face? Which one does it say, Chris?
It says whom the Lord knew face to face.
So
Because
it
what
doesn't
it's
say whom
saying
the
is
prophet knew
nobody's
face to
arised
face.
like Moses, and then gives the criterion afterwards.
Okay. So we know that the text literally says, whom the Lord knew face to face. The text does not say whom the prophet knew face to face. Okay, good. That's been established. And did you understand it said whom did the signs and wonders in Egypt to Pharaoh? Did you see this part right over here? What were the signs and wonders in Egypt that Jesus did, which Moses did to Pharaoh? Can you tell me what was that sign and wonder? Go ahead.
Okay, Nadir, that was your 3 minute.
Sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so first off, Nadir seems to think that the signs and wonders performed have to be the identical signs as the ones in Exodus. And again, that's just a horrible misinterpretation of the text. It's just saying that that's where and how he had done those signs and wonders. It's not saying that the prophet, to be like Moses, has to do those same signs and wonders. So to say that somebody's reading into the text to to give their own personal interpretation. I believe you're doing a very good job at that yourself. Now, if we notice, everybody, when we started talking about signs and wonders, what Nadir had to do is he had to throw the Quran under the bus, because the Quran doesn't actually have any miracles or signs that Muhammad actually performed. What he actually has to do is he actually has to go to hadith. Now, the reason why I say hadith is second, third, and fourth hand knowledge and really can't be trusted is because, well, it depends on what Muslim you're speaking to. You can quote a hadith and they're like, yes, that's a Sahih hadith. And they'll agree with you, and they'll try to reason out what the hadith says. You quote the same hadith to somebody else and they're going to be like, no, that's a weak hadith. Our scholars don't even accept that one. But so the problem is that Muslims will reject or accept hadiths just basically on what they say, not on some chain of narration anymore. And the thing is even if you want to go with these chains of narration, the earliest hadith is dated to 150 to 200 years after the death of Muhammad. That means for 150 to 200 years, there's no written document of any of these hadiths. Now, Muslims want to discredit the authenticity of the Bible because there's so many years in between Jesus' death and the start of the writing of the New Testament. But they will not do this for the first 150 years of Islam when it comes to hadith. Now, if you want to go to hadith and start proving Moses or Muhammad and Moses were the same, you're going to have to go to the ones where he cross-dresses and all these other hadith that you don't like, that makes Muhammad look bad in the light of society. You have to go to these as well. You can't just pick and choose which hadiths that you want to use. And that's what Muslims are going to do. So if the only place that you can show signs and wonders is in a hadith and not in your Quran, I'm not going to accept it, because you're not going to accept me quoting a church father saying that Jesus did a sign and wonder and say, well, where's it during the time of Jesus? Why isn't it in the Bible? So by the same criterion, I'll say it to you. Again, I'm going right back to Deuteronomy 34, the criterion, signs and wonders, knowing God face to face.
Okay, that was 3 minutes. Okay, Nadir.
Okay, so what I'm doing right now, I'm basically crouched over Chris. I'm prying open his eye and say, look what it says over there. And if he doesn't want to see it, that's fine. So he's saying I'm giving my own interpretation. It said whom the Lord knew face to face. It does not say whom the prophet knew face to face. Whom the Lord knew face to face. If he doesn't want to accept what the text says, that's fine. But as
Nadir,
I said,
let's just pause there.
My 3 minutes.
Why should it say prophet for my argument?
Chris, I'm sorry. Unless he asks you a direct question, please don't interrupt him. Okay, go ahead.
So, as I said, this is what he's giving you is an interpretation of an interpretation. That's all Christians do. They just bring interpretations. He said that the whole point about whom the Lord knew face to face, this is what it means to be like Moses. That's an interpretation. So that's interpretation number one. And then he tried to interpret what it means, what the Lord knew face to face. So not only is it's actually a worse situation than just giving your interpretation. He's giving you a dependency tree of interpretation. One interpretation is dependent on the second one. Why? Because Christians have no fact. They have to burn the history of Islam to make Jesus true. And he tried to give some really, outlandish reasons. Well, Muslims reject hadith. That's why I'm going to reject your hadith. I don't know what he's talking about. I accept all hadiths. He also fabricated and misled, say that Muhammad, cross-dressed. This is all slanders because why? It's a fundamental issue, which is we are going to see in all this discussion. Christians don't have fact to back up what they say. It's just an interpretation of not even just an interpretation. It's an interpretation of an interpretation. Okay, so so basically this idea of burning the history of Islam to make Jesus true. If that's what you believe, that's fine. But I'm sure a majority of the Christians, especially the 8th grade classroom, will embrace the history of Islam and not engage in the type of history burning. You said that the Quran said something about does not have any signs or miracles. There's actually many signs and miracles within the Quran, but regarding Muhammad, it doesn't belong there because the history of Muhammad is in the Hadith. It's not in the Quran. It's not supposed to be there. So saying I'm only going to follow what the Quran teaches, and then when it's time to attack Islam, then I'll follow the Hadith. I'm sure most Christian people will look at that and say that's absurd. We have now one last topic. Well, actually, we didn't get into the whole thing about the brethrens, what the brethrens mean, but I think what we need to do now is talk about how is Muhammad like Moses. Let's see if we have any unique characteristics between them. Is that good with everybody?
I'm going to take my 3 minutes when it's time, whenever it's time.
Okay. And it's actually going to be time right about now. That was Nadir's time. So I think Nadir was trying to transition to another topic. So that's up to you, gentlemen, how you want to deal with that.
Yeah.
But it's Chris's 3 minutes at this point.
Yeah, and Nadir, I'm going to ask you a question. The question I'm going to ask you is you keep referring to Deuteronomy 34, 10 to 12. And you keep stating that when it says, whom the Lord knew face to face, it doesn't say whom the prophet knew face to face. Can you explain why my argument depends on it saying the prophet or whom the prophet knew face to face?
Whom the Lord, we should take it literally. Whom the Lord knew face to face. God knows everybody's face to face.
No, sir. You keep saying it doesn't say the prophet, whom the prophet knew face to face.
Right.
Why are you saying it doesn't say that? Why is this so big to my argument?
Well, I think what the point which you're making is that, okay, well, God appeared to, according to the Bible, appeared to Moses in a burning bush. And so Moses saw God face to face. So that is, I think, where you're trying to go with that. But the text doesn't say that. The text says the whom Lord knew face to face. But this is an interpretation of an interpretation, because who is to say that this is what the likeness of Moses really is being defined as? That's an interpretation. So based on that,
so you would agree that when you state whom the prophet knew face to face has no bearing on my argument, because it doesn't make any sense if you read the whole verse, right? If you read the whole verse and you insert the word prophet instead of the word Lord, the sentence makes no sense. It only makes sense if you use the word Lord. So what you're doing is you're trying to make the sentence not make sense to try to get away from the argument that I'm actually making. Mm-hmm. And yes, you're right. The argument that I am making that you're not actually addressing is that the prophet like Moses would have to know God face to face.
That's an interpretation.
No, that's what the text says, sir.
That's your interpretation.
What does the text say?
Since then, no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses. Now, this is referring to Joshua. Because
keep going, sir.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So now it comes whom the Lord knew face to face. Now, this has two interpretations.
Okay, so up to that point, it's my time to do. Let me claim my time back.
Sure, yes.
So up to that point, no one except for Moses had known God face to face. Would you agree with that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Up to that point, no one had knew God face to face except for Moses.
That's not what the text says. It says who God
knew. That is exactly what the text says.
Okay, then we're going to have to agree to disagree, because obviously the way I'm reading it, it says whom God knew face to face. Means God knows everybody face to face.
No. If you read the whole sentence, there's not risen one like Moses, who God knows face to face. Meaning, Moses knows God face to face, and he's the only one up to that point. If you read it correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so what you're giving is an interpretation of an interpretation. The first interpretation is you think that this is referring to what a definition of what like Moses means. That's the first interpretation. Now, it sort of makes sense, but there's two interpretations here. Which the other interpretation, which I can show you in a Bible commentary, this is simply praising Moses. It's simply saying, here are the great attributes and quality of Moses, but that's not what like Moses mean? Like Moses here is Joshua.
Okay,
That's
so
the other interpretation.
Gentlemen, I don't want to interrupt you, but just want to clarify
Yeah.
in regards to the segments. That was Chris's segment. Now we're going to be back on 3 minutes from Nadir. So
Okay, my turn?
Yes.
Okay, so all the Christians can give is interpretations of interpretation. It's not even like they're just going to give you an interpretation. It's a dependency tree of interpretations. Why? Because they don't have fact. Let me give some facts between Muhammad and Moses. Fact number one. Now remember, I pinned him down. Where are the unique characteristics and attributes which Jesus and Moses had? There were none. He couldn't point it out to you. He tried to say, well, I think we have a definition of what like Moses means. But still, even in there, we don't have any uniqueness between the two. Moses was a military prophet. He dispatched an army to the Midianites, and he utterly destroyed them. He beheaded, or his troops, they killed the 5 kings. So he believed in war, and he mixed war and religion. Muhammad also was a warrior prophet. He dispatched an army, and he mixed war and religion. Now, that's an attribute. That's an attribute and a quality. Second, number 2, they were successful. Moses was successful. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was successful. The attribute of success. Now, that's a very unique characteristic. That's a genetic trait to it. I mean, you could go ahead and try to be. There are other warrior prophets who have tried to be like that, but none of them, actually I can say none of them has ever been successful except Moses and Muhammad. What are some other unique characteristics between the two? They were both theocrats. They both believed in a theocratic society. Number 4, I think I'm at number 4. They were successful in establishing and creating a theocracy. And finally, actually 2 more points, they both built an army from scratch, which is really amazing. They had a civilian population over here. From this civilian army, they both built up an army and led them to victory with the law of God in one hand and warriors in the other, you could say. This is a very unique characteristics of these people. Historians have weighed in as well on this. Many, including from Time magazines, have pointed out that there are unique similarities between Moses and Muhammad. So, in conclusion, we see that these are astonishing characteristics. Where just to repeat that they both were military prophets. They both dispatched an army. They were both able to lead them to victory. They were theocrats. They established a theocratic society, and they were both lawgivers. I'm not talking about, I guess all prophets give laws, but laws, I mean, a very theocratic law is what I'm talking about. So go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Chris, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, again, and I want to state 2 truths first. The first truth, the reason why Deuteronomy 18:18, the reason why the verse was given was because of the assembly in Horeb, when the Israelites pleaded to God to give them somebody to reveal his message to them so they didn't have to hear from him anymore. The second truth is that the phrase from among you or from among your brethren is used 13 times. Every time it is used for the Israelite nation. With these 2 truths, Nadir has to refute them for him to be able to insert his Arabic prophet into the prophet like Moses in Deuteronomy 18:18. Sometimes I get frustrated, and I do pray God that he gives me the ability to be able to deal with Nadir without the frustration, because Nadir seems to think that the only refutation he needs to give is to say it's an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. The problem is I'm reading the text. I'm giving you what the text says. Not my interpretation of what the text says, but what the text actually says. And the text actually says in 13 texts of the first 5 books of Moses that the phrase from among your brethren or from among you is only addressed to the Israelite nation. Also, the only reason that God has give this prophecy of a prophet to be like him, or to be like Moses, sorry, is because of the Israelites' cry and their pleading to God for them not to be able to listen to him anymore. They wanted a prophet that God could speak to, so they didn't have to hear him. So you're going to have to explain why Muhammad would be this prophet that the Israelites were pleading to God to send them, that didn't actually go to the Israelite nation, that went to the Arabic nation instead. You're also going to have to actually address with the text the phrase from among your brethren, from among you, why every time it is used for the Israelite nation and never for any other nation. You need to address these two truths before you can assert Muhammad into that prophecy. I'll end my 3 minutes there.
Okay, that was right on time. Thank you, Chris. Okay, Nadir, you have 3 minutes.
And I think we're going to have time to talk about brethren. And I'm sorry, yeah, I've been avoiding that because I wanted to get to the more important things than your personal interpretation on what brethren means. So, Chris, I showed you unique characteristics which makes a person like someone else. So you share that guy's unique attributes and characteristics, like Donald Trump was a successful billionaire in real estate. If I did that, yeah, I'm kind of like Donald Trump. These are unique characteristics. I shared them with you that they were both military prophets. They both were successful. They both built an army from ground up. They both established a state. They were both theocrats. They were both lawgivers, not just any law, but a very, you could say, a theocratic law, which has rules on dietary laws, from who you can marry, all the way to even death penalties. You'll find that in the law of Moses and the law of Muhammad, which is called Sharia law. These are unique characteristics. I will talk about brethren now, but let me just ask quick before we go there. Do you have any dispute on what I have presented to you?
Yeah, I disagree with Moses being a warrior prophet and your other categories that you stated. Every other prophet in the Old Testament can assert to that, so that's not specific similarities between Muhammad and Moses.
I didn't say warrior prophet. I said Moses dispatched an army to go and fight the Midianites. Is that a fact?
Sir, you addressed Muhammad as a warrior prophet, didn't you?
Not in well, I might have said that, but what I mean by that, again, that's open for interpretation. But did Moses dispatch an army to go fight the Midianites?
Sure.
Did Muhammad dispatch an army to go and fight?
Who cares? But really,
Okay,
who cares? Because
Thank
so
you.
did David.
Let's
So
go
did
on to
Saul.
brethren.
So
Yes.
did many others. It doesn't matter.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Okay, so now let's go on to brethren. So I think, as I have shown you tonight, why is Muhammad the true prophet? Is because it is based upon fact. What Christians give you are dependency trees of interpretation, not just interpretations, because they don't have any fact to support what they believe in this regard. Now, when we get to the term brethren, his interpretation that brethren can only mean Israelites, which goes right back to what I'm saying. Once again, an interpretation of an interpretation. So let's first go to Genesis chapter 16, verse 11. It was talking about Ishmael, and it said, "And he will be he'll be a wild man, and his hands will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. He shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." So, who is the brethren of the Israelites? It's the Ishmaelites. And look what it says over here. He shall dwell in their presence. So, wherever you got Israelites, you got Ishmaelites. Go ahead.
Okay, and that was 3 minutes. Okay, Chris, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, again, if we notice, Nadir says that he's going to refute, of course, everything that I've said. Um, so he focuses in on this word brethren. He forgets or he just avoids that I actually have stated, I believe at least 9 times during this podcast, that the term or the phrase from amongst your brethren or from among you is in relation to the Israelites 13 separate times. Never once does it mean outside of the Israelite nation. Just pointing to Genesis 16 isn't actually evidence of that because he's not providing any type of context or evidence for the verse that he's quoting. He's just simply quoting it and saying, oh, see, the word brethren's there. But that doesn't mean that the Ishmaelites lived with the Israelites. It's not what it actually means. So when we get to talking about from among your brethren or from among you, as I've said, 13 times it refers to the Israelite nation. Now, I want to speak for a minute on this warrior prophet because maybe Nadir won't admit right now that he actually says that Moses and Muhammad are warrior prophets. That was actually in his debate with Samuel Green, which originally sparked the disagreement between me and Nadir. And then he actually brought it up again in his interaction with Dr. Michael Brown. And the problem is that Moses is not a warrior prophet. If you wanted to point to a warrior prophet, you could point to Joshua. Joshua led his people into the promised land and conquered the nations to take over the promised land. Moses wasn't allowed into the promised land. So therefore, just because one time he would have sent an army in to kill somebody, that doesn't mean he's a warrior prophet. And if it does, every other prophet in the Old Testament that sent an army into war must be a warrior prophet. Therefore, it disqualifies this actual category of Muhammad and Moses being similar in coordination with this warrior prophet thing. And again, he's not actually ever addressing this. He's trying to say, before he said, everyone knows God face to face. That's a lie. He's flat out lying. As a Muslim, he cannot say every Muslim knows Allah face to face. Nobody's seen Allah unless you claim that you've seen Allah where Muhammad didn't even see him, right? Allah sent Jibril down to Muhammad. So explain how everyone has seen God.
Okay, and that was 3 minutes. Go ahead, Nadir.
So now he's giving more of his personal interpretations. He's saying Moses is not a warrior prophet. It doesn't fit his definition of war. This is all his own personal interpretations. And the reason why, see, the thing is, we don't have a good English word to describe this. That's why I use the word warrior, and also because this is why historians use the word warrior to describe Moses, like Encyclopedia Britannica, as well as others. So, but the word doesn't matter which English word I'm using. The issue here is he was a military prophet, and that's what I said to you, Chris. But anyways, let me go on to the brethren 13 times. I'm sorry, I've been avoiding it all this time because I wanted to bring up all these issues here. So we have to understand that Abraham had 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. From the Ishmaelites comes the Arabs. From the from Isaac comes the Israelites. Literally, they are brethren. Okay, literally, they are brethren. Now, his point is figuratively that it's always been used for the Israelites 13 times in the Bible. That's fine, 13 times. So why is it then when we go to Deuteronomy? So this means that he's using brethren in a figurative way. Why is it that when we're going to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18, we are saying this doesn't automatically, absolutely mean Israelites? Again, this goes back, what all he has in defense tonight are personal interpretations, as you can see, because at any point, any time, God can refer literally. It could refer literally. It can refer to the Ishmaelites. Figuratively, it can refer to the Israelites. It is a matter of interpretation. If we read the verse there, it's open for interpretation. It can refer to either the Ishmaelites or it can refer to the Israelites. 13 times he referred to Israelites, but only one time he said, "Oh, by the way, brethren, don't forget the Ishmaelites are your brethren." So now this opens up the possibility, and because, and this is the most important reason, God is unpredictable. Just because you saw it 13 times, say, I can predict how God is going to use this the next time. No, you cannot. If it was used 100 times, I'm saying there's no way you can predict. God can at any time go literal on you, and this is all part of God's will and plan. So my point here is the verse Deuteronomy 18:18, and I shall raise up a prophet from amongst their brethren. Logically, we can look at that and say it can refer to either one. There's no way you can prove that this can only refer to the Israelites. It's open for interpretation, which is what everything the Christians bring, interpretation after interpretation. Muslims bring fact.
Okay. Okay, Nadir, that was 3 minutes. Go ahead, Chris. You there, Chris?
Whoops, sorry, yeah.
Right.
I just want to ask you a question first, Nadir. Or you can start my time though, of course, Kenny.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
When you're giving a response, are you giving your own personal interpretation?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay, so I only give fact. Fact, for example, both Muhammad and Moses were military prophets. They both
No,
dispatched
sir,
an army.
just a
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
Just a second. When you're reading the verses from the Bible and you're
Yes.
explaining what these verses mean,
Yeah.
are you giving your own personal interpretation of those verses?
Absolutely not. I'm stating a fact that Deuteronomy 18:18 is open for interpretation. That's a fact.
When you state that the brethren means Ishmael in Deuteronomy 18:18, is that your personal interpretation?
No, I never said that. I'm saying it's open for interpretation. I said it could be either the Israelites or the Ishmaelites. It's open.
Excellent. So when you say it's Ishmael, then you're adding your own interpretation. Let's go to Deuteronomy 34. When it says, whom the Lord knew face to face. When you explain this verse, are you giving your own interpretation?
No, I'm stating a fact. The fact which I'm stating is there's a dependency chain of interpretations you're giving. The first
Excellent.
interpretation.
No, sir.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
good. I'll claim my time
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
what I've been able to establish here, and I want everybody watching and that will watch on YouTube later, is that anytime I explain the verses that I'm quoting from the Bible, Nadir claims it is my own personal interpretation. When he does the exact same thing, it's not a personal interpretation,
right.
it's fact. That, sir, is being dishonest. You believe that your own view is the only view that can be imposed on this text, and any other view than the view that you hold is a mere personal interpretation of this text. And, sir, you're not a Hebrew scholar. You don't know these certain things. You read certain commentaries. And the thing is, you were actually debating a Hebrew scholar, an Old Testament scholar, a giant in the Old Testament theology. And every time he read it to you in Hebrew. He translated it for you. He explained the verses for you. And instead of saying that it was fact, you claimed he's giving his own personal interpretation. And this, sir, is being dishonest. And this is what you're trying to relate to the YouTube people that listen to you. You seem to think that everything you say is fact and everything everyone else says is personal interpretation, which it's not. And I hope that you actually acknowledge that everything that you say is not fact and that it is your own personal interpretation.
No, it's everything I present tonight is fact. I make sure I do not put my own interpretation into the text. Regarding Dr. Michael Brown,
And
he
this is
actually,
3 minutes, Nadir. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so everything I stated is a fact. Deuteronomy 18:18 is open for interpretation. That's a fact. Okay, because when it says from your own brethren, basically, Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and inside Genesis chapter 16, verse 12, he said, and he shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. So the Ishmaelites are the brethren of the Israelites. That's a fact. So what I'm showing here is that it's open for interpretation. Deuteronomy chapter 34, again, the portion which you are quoting is open for interpretation. I want to go back to the text because I want to show you why, Dr. Michael Brown actually did run away from this point here. And don't be impressed with this speaking Hebrew razzle dazzle stuff. He did that to impress his blind followers. He is, don't be impressed by that, okay? But anyways, remember when Michael Brown was confronted with Deuteronomy chapter 34, he said, okay, yeah, we'll debate that at another time. But then what happened is he sent me an email, says, nope, I'm not going to debate that. So in front of his people, he looked very brave and strong. But after behind closed curtains, he ran away. Let's see what exactly he ran away from. It says, and Joshua, the son of Nun, filled with the spirit of wisdom, and because Moses has laid hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord commanded Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses. Who is it talking about? It's talking about Joshua. What we have here is a definition which is not open for interpretation of what like Moses is. We can at least agree we know it's like Joshua. Muhammad, Moses, and Joshua are very much alike as they were all military prophets. In fact, one of the points I did raise is if you actually Google warrior prophets, guess who comes up on the first page? Muhammad and Joshua. Now, of course, it's been a point of mockery and laughter amongst the Christians that, well, I just believe in the Bible. But what it's showing you is when you present facts to the people, you will see things like the Google algorithm, other things confirming that. So he knew Jesus could never fit in this category of Joshua and Moses. And what did he do? He cowardly ran away. But that's okay, that's fine. But see, so the point which you're raising about whom the Lord knew face to face, my point here, now it gets up, it's open for interpretation. Is this what it means to be like Moses, or are you just praising Moses? Which one is it? That is a fact that now it gets open for interpretation. And what you're missing is that who did the miracles in Egypt to Pharaoh. That's what it's talking about. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's really referring to like Moses here, because that would exclude Jesus. Go ahead.
Okay. And that was 3 minutes. Chris, you have 3 minutes. You there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you guys there?
Yes, yes.
All right, so it's my time now?
Yes, go ahead, bro.
All right. So again, all Nadir is doing is trying to defame Dr. Michael Brown. The reason why Dr. Michael Brown won't debate Nadir is because of his antics and his tactics. Last time he was actually invited on to answer questions just in case Muslims have certain things wrong in the Old Testament. And he actually has the email to prove it. And when he got on there, Nadir tried to lambaste him into a debate on if.
Chris, let's stay on topic and not. This is kind of ad hoc.
No
sir,
personal.
Sir, Nadir said that Dr. Brown ran. I'm explaining why that's not the case.
Okay.
If you didn't want me to explain it, he shouldn't have said it. Okay?
Chris, don't talk to me with disrespect, please. Okay? Talk to me like a gentleman.
Let him continue. Let's wrap it up. Let's just do our 3 minutes closing. And so let's wrap it up.
Well, Nadir should have never mentioned Dr. Brown running away if you don't want me to mention why.
Well,
Yeah, that's fine.
Listen,
Okay.
what's going to happen is you're going to speak to me like a gentleman, and I'll treat you with respect like a gentleman.
Well, you're not gonna. You didn't cut him
No.
off when he was speaking about Dr. Michael Brown, though, and you did me.
Well, because his position wasn't stepping into the world of ad hominem. Okay?
Yes, sir. It was because he said that, sir. It's because he said that he used Hebrew.
Let's move on, guys. We're not gonna convince each other. Let's close. Let's do our 3 minutes closing. Let's go there.
Yeah, and Kenny, the ad hominem was when he said that he spoke
Chris,
Hebrew.
I've already let you slide on calling him a liar earlier with ad hominem. Okay, so this is the second time that you've come across this, or you've went to ad hominem, and that's why I stopped you. Okay, so I want to be respectful. I've treated you like a gentleman. I ask you to treat me like a gentleman, treat him like a gentleman, and so forth.
Am I going to have my 3-minute conclusion without interruption?
Well, sure, but
let's go. Go ahead, Chris, please.
You're the one that sidetracked the issue. Okay, what I'm trying to do is make sure that no one's insulting one another. What's happened yesterday is yesterday. This is a brand new day. We're talking about today. Okay, so let's talk about today, and let's keep going. So, matter of fact,
before I start my closing,
3 minutes over.
Before I start my closing, Kenny, would you acknowledge that Nadir stated that he said Dr. Brown only spoke Hebrew just for his people to make him look good?
Okay, well, you was, like I'm telling you, was crossing the line with what you were saying. You can go back and listen to it. You were stepping into the world of ad hominem, which is why I stopped you. Okay, I've dealt with you before, but it's not anything new.
Is that an ad hominem what Nadir said?
Okay, guys, I gotta get going. I gotta get going. Seriously, we've kind of went over. Let's do our 3 minutes closing, please.
Go ahead.
Starting off with my 3 minutes. So as we can see, Nadir simply, all he's going to do is try to say that any argument against him is merely a personal interpretation. And anything Nadir actually says himself is the only pure fact. So it doesn't matter what Nadir debates, doesn't matter what Nadir says, he's the only one that knows these facts and nobody else does. Everybody else merely has their own personal interpretation that doesn't hold water, and that Nadir's this all-knowledgeable man that knows everything and only what he says is fact. Because when I asked him, when he's interpreting these verses, if he's giving his own personal interpretation, he says, no, it's fact. When I asked him when I explain the verses that I'm quoting, what I'm doing, and he says that it's my own personal interpretation. So it's not an ad hominem to try to say that somebody is asserting themselves and has an ego above someone else when they actually assert this within their argument. Now, another thing that Nadir actually said, and I'm not going to go into the Muhammad and to the Moses thing, because I believe that it is not wrong. It's completely impossible for Muhammad to be like Moses. And the reason is, when we go to Deuteronomy 34:10, it says that there's not been a prophet arose like Moses is the last few words. And then it qualifies what it means to be like Moses right afterwards. So the verse says, no one has been like Moses. And then it gives the qualification for it to be like Moses afterwards. And because of these qualifications, it definitely cannot be Muhammad. And again, the two truths that I stated at the start of this podcast still remains today, or still remains right now, is that the only reason Deuteronomy 18:18 was revealed was because of the assembly in Horeb, when the Israelites asked God to send them a prophet. And also the phrase from among your brethren, or from among you, is used 13 times and always is referred to the Israelite nation, never to the Arab nation or anything else like this. So these two truths are still true as of right now. Nadir has not been able to refute anything that I've said. The only refutation that he's going to offer anything is it's your own personal interpretation. And when he says this so he doesn't actually have to address your argument. He can just bypass it and get on to something else. And we can see that he's done this all day. He's never actually addressed my arguments. He never actually addressed Dr. Michael Brown's arguments. He never actually addressed Samuel Green's arguments within their debate either. You can actually look at it. He'll say, oh, we'll talk about that later. I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later, but never actually gets to it because he simply says it's your own personal interpretation. Therefore, he doesn't have to refute it, and he just kicks it aside. That is one of the most childish ways. Hello?
Hello.
I
can
got
hear you.
I
Can you
got
hear me?
muted by the host.
No, I think Kenny, I
Kenny's
can't hear
muted.
you. Kenny, I can't
Kenny,
hear
you're
you.
muted.
You're muted. Kenny.
Kenny keeps muting me, but why is Kenny muting me? That don't make any sense.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, but he'll mute me again, but we can't hear.
I can't hear you. Yeah. Oh well. I don't know we can't hear you. Let me see if I can text him.
Not sure what's going on live stream.
Interesting.
Kenny keeps muting me, but he's muted himself. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if my time's up.
Yeah, that was 3 minutes, but I think he muted himself.
Like it could have been my time, and I would have, you know, I would have muted my mic at the end of my time. I've got no problem with that. But he seems to keep muting me for some reason, but he's not unmuting himself.
Okay, so alhamdulillah. So you could
Kenny, you muted you're on mute, Kenny.
Let me clarify just briefly. Chris, I put you on mute. Maybe you couldn't hear it, so let's put this in perspective. Okay, I put you on mute because I was telling you that your 3 minutes was up. Okay, your 3 minute was up. The last thing that you said was he was being childish. So there's another case of you attacking him with ad hominem. Okay, but your 3 minutes was up. Okay, so I apologize. I had myself on mute. I didn't realize that. Here I am talking, trying to explain something to you. You could not hear me. That was my mistake. Alhamdulillah. So your 3 minutes was up. It's now Nadir's 3 minutes for his closing. Go ahead, Nadir.
Okay. So, yeah, this is in fact, I encourage everybody else. In fact, they actually are doing that. When you meet, Christians, make sure you point out you're only giving your own interpretation. This is just not me, but many people have pointed this out, that the Christian case is nothing but personal interpretations. So there's actually a reference called the Baloney Detection Kit by Dr. Carl Sagan. He was a great astronomer, physicist, and there he pointed out that when you debate with the Christians, you point out how they are only using their own interpretation. And in fact, what the quote from there, excellent quote, was, spin more than one interpretation. Don't just run with your own favorite one. And that's what I was doing. When I say that you're using your own interpretation, I'm doing exactly what Dr. Carl Sagan is saying. Show the Christian the other valid interpretations which they are missing, and they're only trying to run with the one which suits their favor, which is what I believe Chris has been doing all night. Why? Because there are no facts. No facts to support the case that Jesus is a prophet like Moses, as we saw today. He was pinned down. I said, what unique characteristics, what unique qualities is there between Jesus and Moses? He couldn't show one, not a single one, because there are none. Moses was a man of terror. He brutally committed genocide, and he murdered innocent men, women, and children. And he said, oh, and the little girls, you can keep them for yourself. Is this Jesus? It's like comparing Joseph Stalin with Mother Teresa. It's silly. You just don't do that. So, of course, as we see, they're very different. We found no qualities between the two. And then finally, we saw Muhammad had many unique qualities and attributes, which seals the deal. We saw that they were both military prophets. They both dispatched an army. We saw that they were both successful. We saw that they both built an army from ground up. We saw that they were theocrats. They established a theocratic society, and they were lawgivers. They gave the people a law, a theocratic law, very rigid theocratic law to follow. Historians, as well as others, have seen and pointed out Muhammad is very much like Moses. These are all facts, not open for interpretation. The whole issue about, well, brethren can only mean Israelites, these are all, the Christians have been reduced to nothing but personal interpretations. We've pointed out that brethren literally could refer to the Ishmaelites. Figuratively, it can refer to the Israelites. It can go either way. God is unpredictable, and we don't know what he really meant behind that verse. But Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 9 and 10 was a smoking gun, because we do have what like Moses means, and that's like Joshua. And he was a warrior, military prophet. Jesus doesn't fit in, which renders the debate victory right here. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, that was your 3 minutes. Okay, all right, so I don't know where we proceed from here, but I did let some other people onto the panel: Eric Smith, Ariel, Brother Kareem, and so, gentlemen, are you gentlemen done with your arguments? There was the closing statements. We're done.
We're done. Let's do Q&A. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to ask, though, Kenny, is I have about 15 minutes that I need to do my own thing for. So I need to leave for about 10 or 15 minutes and then come. Is it okay if I come back in at that? Is my mic okay?
Sure. I think that's gonna put a little twist to the open discussion. But yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, you can come back in. I mean, we all have things we have to take care of, so that's not a problem. And hey, look, Chris, I wasn't trying to be. He's already gone, but I wasn't trying to be rude to him. I was simply trying to stop him at the appropriate time. Alhamdulillah.
But
okay,
I got about 10 minutes. I got to do my iftar.
Okay, so, all right. Yeah. So I guess the only thing we can do at this point is allow.
Well, then, any questions, real quick? I could perhaps address one or two that I got to.
Okay. Well, let's. I'll just unmute. Everyone can unmute themselves. I'm trying to unmute everyone. So whoever wants to speak up. I know Brother Green wanted to ask Chris something, but Chris will be back in about 15 minutes, I think.
Can you hear me? Salam alaikum.
Could I ask Nadir something really quickly?
Sure.
Okay. Who said that? Ariel? Yeah.
Everybody hear me?
Go ahead,
okay.
Ariel.
So you referenced Deuteronomy 34 of verses 9 to 10. I wanted to focus on verse 10, where the author says, "And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." It seems that when in Deuteronomy 18 it says that God would raise a prophet from among your midst and from among your brethren, it seems to be repeated here that there has not since arisen a prophet since in the land of Israel like Moses. So it seems to be understanding from among your midst as referring to from among the people of Israel, so that geographical region. So I'm trying to understand how Muhammad would fit into this, since he never presented himself as a prophet in the land of Israel, so far as I know. But I might be mistaken, since I don't know everything about Muhammad's biography. So how would you respond to that?
So, going back to, I think, Deuteronomy 18:18, where it says, "From amongst your midst." Well, who's in the midst? Remember, the Ishmaelites are always with the Israelites. That's what the Bible says. Inside Genesis chapter 16, verse 12, it said, "And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man against him." This is talking about Ishmael. "And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." So in the midst here, you got who? The Israelites, and who dwells in their presence? The Ishmaelites. So once again, I'm saying that this is open for interpretation. The verse could mean Israelites. It could mean Ishmaelites. If you just look at the text, you're not going to know. Not enough information is given. So that was the verse which I quoted was Genesis chapter 16, verse 11 and 12. So from amongst your midst refer to both Israelites and Ishmaelites, because Ishmael dwells in his presence. Go ahead.
Can I say something about that, Kenny?
But so that's an interesting response, because if you look at verse 10, it specifically specifies what the phrase "from your midst" would have meant within the book of Deuteronomy. It's referring to the land of Israel. So the author is concerned with God raising a prophet like Moses from the land of Israel. So I'm not sure where the ambiguity is left. It's pretty clear in the text.
Well, it's pretty
within
clear it's
Israel.
a personal
That's the
interpretation.
operative land. That's the context. So I'm not
No,
sure
no.
why you're leaving any ambiguity where the author himself doesn't leave any ambiguity.
I can answer that.
Well, let me just answer that real quick. That's all personal interpretation, okay?
No,
The text doesn't say mist is only Israelites. There's nothing like that, which goes right back to what I was pointing out.
Can I say something about that?
Christians
Ken?
don't have facts to support what they believe. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's try to, so we don't get chaos here.
Yeah.
I see Eric wants to ask something. Kareem wants to ask something of Chris when Chris comes back. So Marshall wanted to respond. So let's
let our Christian guests, as Muslims, we let our Christian guests speak first. So
right.
let's let Eric Smith speak first, please.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. Okay. Nadir keeps insisting that this is some type of private interpretation. I watched the debate that he had with Dr. Michael Brown, who's a Hebrew linguist, who's spent his entire life studying that language, and he pointed out to you at that time, Nadir, and I'm just going to remind you tonight that when that word when that phrase amongst your brethren, amongst your people is used in Deuteronomy 18 or Deuteronomy 14 times, oh, by the way, it is always 14 times is used referring to just Israelites. It has nothing to do with the Ishmaelites because there was not an Ishmaelite at Mount Horeb. So all of this insistence that you can go back to Genesis 16:12 and show the relationship between Ishmael and Isaac as being brothers, and then try to correlate that to Deuteronomy 18 or anything in Deuteronomy is fallacious. And he told you that during that debate. That you're still insisting that. Well, I'm just making the point that Nadir is using something that is a fallacious argument, saying that it's amongst the brethren, it includes the Ishmaelites, and it does not. And he was told that in that debate.
Well, let me respond
sorry.
to that. Yeah.
Yes,
so once again, as we see, Christians only have subjective, personal interpretations because they have no facts.
No.
Let me answer the question. So,
that's not true.
Hold on, Eric.
And he explained to you.
Let's let Nadir respond to this.
Okay. Yeah. So really, remember, Michael Brown ran away. We didn't have a debate. We had a discussion, first of all. Michael Brown did run away because he saw the reality of Deuteronomy chapter 34. Now, I'm ready to discuss with him, but he ran away because he saw Deuteronomy chapter 34 excluded Jesus. And when he saw that, he said, oh, yeah, Nadir, we will debate about that. I said, okay, sure. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, this guy's going to run. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He knew that Deuteronomy chapter 34 excluded Jesus. Why? Because like Moses was defined as Joshua. Joshua is a great warrior. He led armies into battle. And he's like, oh my God, Jesus is not like that. And he took off running. So don't go with this appeal to authority, the great scholar and all this. Look, whatever. You saw that he ran, and everyone can see that. Now, going back to, you said that no Ishmaelites were in Horeb. That's not what the Bible says. Let's read it one more time. Inside Genesis chapter 16, verse 12. It says, and ye shall dwell in the...
let the man speak, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, sir. No, you go ahead, sir. Eric Smith interrupted you. Go ahead, sir. Okay, go ahead, Aki.
Well,
I just want to finish up.
To
understand
the Israelites meeting at Horeb during the Exodus. The
Ishmaelites are right there because they dwell in their presence.
Where?
They dwell in the presence of the Israelites.
Where? We're at Mount Horeb?
That's everywhere you see Israelites, you got Ishmaelites.
I do not know. I do not know where you get that.
And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. What does that mean to you? Can you explain what that means?
That means that in chapter 16 of Genesis, that's what's going on. But that has nothing to do with something that occurs.
Personal interpretations. They don't have facts.
Are you kidding me? This is something that has happened 600 years.
Deuteronomy 34 has already excluded Jesus. We know it's not the prophet.
I'm not talking about...
Elk, give the definition. Give a definition of give a definition of the dictionary of beneath mean. What does it mean?
I'm sorry. Who are you referring to?
I have no
I'm asking Eric Smith. I'm
May
asking
I
Eric Smith.
ask something also?
Hold on.
idea.
I'm asking Eric Smith. Give the definition of beneath in the dictionary. What's the definition?
I don't know. But what I'm going to
Okay,
say,
it means two things. It can mean direct family, or it can mean stepsons, or stepfathers, or stepsons. As you see, Prophet Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Now, beneath can mean stepbrothers. So
you
yes,
say brethren, brother? You mean brethren?
yes, brethren means two things: mean direct family, or it can mean stepbrothers. So as we know, Abraham, peace be upon him, had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, peace be upon both of them. They were stepsons. So this qualifies on the definition of the dictionary beneath. You need to read the dictionary.
And you know what's interesting is the word for brethren in Deuteronomy 18:18 is ach. It's the same word which is in Arabic, and it's the same word which is inside Genesis chapter 16 verse 11.
That one, Nadir?
It's the same.
It is, but it's not.
We can't talk over each other. Eric, chill.
When you use, I'm just trying to tell you what Brown told you that night. I'm just reminding you.
Brown is running away. He's done. He's
fooled
finished.
you on this, Nadir. Everybody's
Brown?
on YouTube.
Let's not be rude to one another. Let's
look. Brown has ran away. He has ran away from Deuteronomy 18:18. He misled his audience. Oh, I'll debate you on that. Yeah, I will. He's gone. So don't bring up Brown.
You're going to debate.
Okay?
You're willing to debate Michael Brown on Deuteronomy 18:18, whether
yes.
You're willing to do a formal debate. Okay, I'm going to write this down here, and I'm going to get Michael Brown to email you, and I'm going to watch him do that. Same thing he did to you in that moderate or that unmoderated debate, because he reminds you that the context that we find of what brethren means in Deuteronomy is completely different in which you're trying to apply it in Genesis 16:12. It's completely different.
Well, this is let me respond to that. See, the problem which Christians have is they're so used to shoving their beliefs down your throats. And that's what they do. This is what the Bible means, and the Bible means this, and the Bible means that, and the Bible is true because the Bible said so. They cannot bring anything more than that.
Of those 14 passages in Deuteronomy that he showed you where it says only their brethren, which one of those refers to somebody outside of the tribe of Israel? Which one of those 14 passages? You go ahead. You could not answer it that evening, and he gave you every opportunity to do it.
Yeah, no, I did answer it. I did answer it.
You didn't provide an answer. The only thing you said is, well, go back to Genesis 16:12, which has nothing to do with it. I sat there, dear.
Okay, you need to calm down, relax.
I'm fine. I'm just enjoying myself. That's all.
Yeah. All right.
I enjoy this too much.
Well, I'll tell you what. I have not eaten or drank anything since 5:30 this morning. I like to get some food. So I tell you what, I'm just going to step away from the computer. If you guys want to continue, go ahead, and I'll try to put on my speaker just so I can kind of listen. Okay.
And that's the same thing. And that's the same thing that Chris was doing. So this is an opportunity. We'll let Chris come back in. He should be coming in any minute, I would assume, and we can pick it up with there, from there, and question him a little bit. And then Nadir, if you want to come back, then we'll keep proceeding. So I just encourage everyone to be gentlemen. Let's not
Yeah. Do you mind if I give my a little bit of commentary on what I've heard so far?
Sure. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, thank you, my brother. I think it's definitely been a interesting debate. Each speaker is very good at expressing his opinions and views. So I really enjoyed it. I was surprised today. I usually don't. I'm not really in favor of these types of debates because I think that that not enough time has been used to explore the Quran itself being a proof for Islam or against it. But okay, so this is an interesting debate, and I really today I was definitely convinced, trying to be unbiased. Nadir convinced me today. I'm not gonna lie, he did a great job. And there was two things in particular that I just wanted to know about Chris. Chris did a great job at that, but there was two blunders in my mind that I really want to ask him about, and I'm interested to know if he actually knew the truth to these and decided not to mention them or what. So there was two things. One is that he said that Muhammad never did any miracles, at least according to the Quran. When the hadith were brought and Nadir questioned him whether he even considers the hadith, he said, and I quote, "I don't care." And that's where Christians go to when they just want to make their argument. That's where they hit their wall. But okay, so what I wanted to say about what I feel Chris made blunders at was the first one about the Quran not containing any miracles of the Prophet. um I'm hearing some feedback. Is that
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
yeah.
Let me mute everyone other than you for right now. Chris is back on the panel, so
Yeah, I'm here, Kareem.
Okay, Chris, did you hear what I've said so far?
Yeah, about me saying that I don't believe that Muhammad had any miracles in the Quran, and
At
that I
least
don't
according
accept
to
the
the
hadith.
Quran. No. I mean that in and of itself is a contradiction. That at this point you don't care about what the hadith say, but of course you would definitely care about the hadith when it comes to any other issue that makes Islam look bad. But what I wanted to say is, have you not seen anything in the Quran about any miracles, or are you just have you seen some things and you just deny them? Where do you fall at? I'm just trying to gauge why would you
Well,
say that, because I can think of two just off the top of my mind without even investigation that are contained in the Quran, miracles of the Prophet.
all right. So when I said that the Quran never contained any miracles or signs like Moses, Nadir actually agreed with me and said that you see these miracles and signs in the hadith. So even Nadir said that there wasn't any.
No. Well, that's the
No, he
thing
did
though,
not. No, he
because
did not. No, he did not say that.
brother, hold on. I think if Nadir were to just take a second outside of the debate and they come more fluently to his mind, me as a person who memorizes the Quran, it comes to me very easily. For example, in Surah Anfal, well, just to give you an example before we even get to the verse, if you were to, for example, have a fight, or maybe a biblical fight. Say theoretically there was a biblical fight narrated in the Old Testament, and at the point where a man punched, it doesn't say he punched, but God himself punched the man. Would you consider that a miracle?
No.
This is terrible, brother. You're making me laugh right now. So you're just gonna deny. Let me get to the verse. So the verse says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. And you, Muhammad, did not throw when you threw, but God himself threw. What is that referring to? The only thing we have in historical literature about what could that possibly be referring to is contained in hadith during a battle where the prophet picked up a handful of sand, threw it, and the whole army were disheveled by the sand and sand going in their faces and the likes of that. Again, there's another hadith. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, the beginning of Surah Qamar, the moon, the Surah of the moon. The hour has drawn near and the moon has been split asunder. What is the only historical evidence of anything linking to that? What could be indicated in that verse is what we have in our hadith, which we accept and you accept in all other regards, of course. If it's talking about the age of Aisha or all these other things, you would accept that as well. So that's the only thing that these verses can be linking to. So Islam itself, in our tradition, the way we see the world, it contains a narration of the Prophet having miracles that the Quran even mentioned. So that was a huge blunder. But the other one was
But
that
Kareem,
God,
can we
the
talk
other
about
one
that
was
for a
that
second?
God and Muhammad have not been face to face, something like that. You mentioned that.
Kareem, can we talk about that for a second,
Well,
though?
that's pretty much closed issue, brother. I can mention many off
No,
the top of my
you
mind,
mentioned.
but
I just
you're
want to
not going to
respond to
accept
what you just
hadith.
said, though, sir, if that's okay.
Go ahead, take a couple seconds because I don't
Because
see how you
the
can.
verses that you just quoted about Muhammad and the battle that he was in, is that the Battle of Badr?
No. I purposely neglected to mention which battle because I want to be upon certainty. One of the battles could have
Would
been
you
Badr. Most likely, it may have been Badr, but then again, I'm not upon certainty of that. But I am upon certainty about the tafsir
now,
of the verse.
if we could take a time travel back in time to that battle,
Yes.
would we see the Muslims physically hitting their enemies?
Chris, would we see Moses physically parting the Red Sea? I mean, it's
Wait. Let me get to his. Let me try to see where he's going with this. Would we see Muslims physically hitting their enemies?
Yes, sir.
In which point? Before the battle? Before the enemies got
During.
towards them? 'Cause that's what this verse is mentioning. This verse is mentioning the face-off before they even were engaged in battle. Muhammad picked up a piece of some sand and threw it, and the verse is actually very abrupt. Therefore, it doesn't have any context except that historical context. If you read the surah, you'll see that verse is really for those who were kind of there and could tell the story. But again, you can definitely
So
understand that the Quran addresses Muhammad over and over without
what miraculous happened though?
basically he took a piece of a small amount of sand in his hand, and from a very long distance he threw sand that got in the eyes of many men,
But
hundreds of men
that
at least.
story is not actually in the Quran, it's in the Hadith, right?
No, I'm saying the Quran. I'm saying what other historical literature do you know that can have a closer contextual evidence towards it being applied to it than this story? What else do we have in Islam? And that's what I'm saying. This verse is so abrupt that there's no other context except the context of the surah itself, which is all about war. And fal means the spoils of war. And in it, God is speaking all throughout it about the early wars of Islam. And the pronoun is you. You didn't throw when you threw, but God himself threw. So who could that be speaking to? And what could that mean other than something miraculous happen? If God says he steps in your shoes, as it were, and does something on your behalf, and you're saying that's not a miracle, that's your biasness. Because in any other context, if God became your throwing or your hitting or your running, I would say that's pretty unnatural and that's pretty miraculous. But anyway, let's get to the God not meeting Muhammad face to face. So that was kind of your criteria also, right? Muhammad didn't fall into that.
Well, yeah. My whole argument there was, and it stems from Deuteronomy 34:10-12, because it says no prophet has risen like Moses, and then it gives two qualifications to be like Moses afterwards.
Well, wouldn't that mean no one has risen up until that point? Because he's addressing Joshua. He's saying that no one has risen like Moses up until that point. It doesn't say anything about after Moses. There's many prophets after Moses that had similar attributes. They performed miracles. Elijah performed 17 miracles as recorded in the Bible. The miracle of Jonah, for say, residing 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish. That's a miracle. But anyway, so it's saying no one has risen like Moses up until that point. It doesn't say there's not going to be another prophet to come after him like that. As a matter of fact, 18:18 is referencing another prophet or prophets, and it's actually my contention. It's not limiting. Deuteronomy 18 is not limiting the prophets to come to just Jesus, peace be upon him, or Muhammad, peace be upon him. I believe it's applying to any prophet that's going to be sent to address certain groups of people at a certain period of time. So, with that being said, go ahead, Kareem. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I wanted to ask him this. Because I want to get past, I want to try to ask him this so he answers it objectively. In Islamic history, in any story that you can think of, whether you accept or reject it, and also you mentioned that Muslims cannot just accept or reject hadith just based upon will. That's not true. We have a vigorous science that establishes why we accept or reject them. But you may feel that some people are doing that, but we actually have a science like textual criticism. But what I want to say is, for Muhammad not being in the presence of God face to face, you kept using that. In Islamic history, in the history of our literature, what would be the closest thing to that, if you know? Like, what would, okay, so you reject that there's any instance where Muhammad is painted, at least in the hadith, as being face to face with God. What would be the closest thing to that if you were in our shoes? What would you be able to present? Because I want to know if you're, because I'm thinking of so many things, and I'm asking myself, are you missing this? Are you hiding it because you don't know it, or you're not remembering it at the time? Because there's many things we can mention and really making a good argument of Muhammad being face to face with God, even though the means of revelation was just through the angel Gabriel, at least when he was upon the earth. But yeah, so what would be the closest thing? What would you think would be our best argument to counter that? Or do you think there's nothing in our literature that can claim Muhammad was in the presence of God in a way that, at least in linguistically, you can say he was face to face with God? What would be the closest thing?
First off, you would have to show from the Quran that Muhammad actually saw Allah face to face.
Why do you
would actually, Kenny, can I respond?
I'm just curious as to why you put the limitation on the Quran when you know we have.
Can I respond?
To explain the issue.
Yes, sir. I'm going to. That's what I was going to explain after I made my statement. Is that okay with you?
Sure, but you understand why I stopped you. I'm asking you why you're limiting the issue to the Quran, when in fact what the brother's pointing out to you is there many hadith that address the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was in the presence of Allah.
Kenny,
maybe you're not aware of those points. That's fine. We'll tell you about those as we proceed. But that's why I stopped you. Okay.
No, yeah, and I heard what Kareem said, and I'm going to address what Kareem said, and I'm going to give him the reasons why I'm stating what I'm stating. So I would accept from the Quran, if you could point to it, that Muhammad saw Allah face to face.
So you reject things in the Quran that's out of agreement with you, and you want to accept things.
Can I please finish my statement, Kenny?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. But you're trying to limit the issue to the Quran when we have.
I'm going to explain why.
We have authentic hadith that explain.
I'm going to explain why, Kenny.
Okay. Well, it's not up to you, Chris. That's what the point that I'm trying to make.
It is.
No, it's not, because
it is.
No, it's not.
Sir, can I finish? Can I finish what I was saying to Kareem, sir?
No. What I'm trying to point out to you is you don't dictate.
Oh my God! Let me know when I'm allowed to speak again.
Let me ask you just one question, Chris. Do you agree with me that the hadith are words of men? Do you agree with me that the hadith are words of men? Just quite simply.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yes, I'm asking a question. Do you agree that the hadith are words of men?
I believe everything is words of men.
Okay, so you believe everything is words of men. Thank you. And so you know that the Bible is written according to the words of men. You want to accept the Bible?
Jenny, can we go back to the question that Kareem?
Right, we're addressing the issue right now. You want to reject what the Quran says. I mean, the hadith. What the hadith says when it's words according to man, and you want to accept what the Bible says when it's words according to man. The point I'm trying to make to you is that you're trying to place a stipulation and a limit on the criterion about whether or not the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, seen Allah face to face, our Creator face to face. When in fact, in the authentic hadith, we do have signs that the night of the ascension in particular.
Let me know when I can finish.
Right, you can finish after I'm done talking, but we do have signs in the hadith that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on the night of the ascension in particular, was in the presence of Allah. Okay, so you trying to limit the argument to just the Quran and making that the limits of Islamic history, you're not allowed to do that. It shows a bias. But go ahead.
Okay, so the reason why I would accept only the Quran and Muhammad seeing Allah in the Quran is because people like Kenny Bomer will say that the New Testament is nothing but a fairy tale. So for him to be able to say the New Testament.
Hold on, Kenny, let me speak. Let me speak. Kenny, real quick.
I don't think that they're going to give you a chance to speak. They're going to keep interrupting you and keep interrupting you. So I would just
Marshall.
You know, I don't know what to say.
Am I
I'm
allowed to
watching
speak,
it, so I'm
Kenny?
kind of astonished.
Eric, I'm not gonna keep interrupting. He just made a statement about something that I would
And
say.
you guys have made similar statements, and we didn't interrupt you for when you made those statements. So why do you
What
do
he
that to
said,
him?
I would never say. I didn't say what he just said I would say. So I have a right to stop him and say, wait a minute, don't tell me what I would say. Don't tell the world what you think that I would say, when in fact I wouldn't say the very thing that he just said.
Kenny, 1 week ago on your podcast, you said it when I asked you a question.
What did I say, Chris?
The question I asked you on your podcast was, I said, if a Muslim quotes the New Testament and they're saying that Muhammad is prophesied in that verse that they're quoting, do they have to accept that as being part of the original Injil? If not, they're looking at it as if it's like a fairy tale, like the book of Harry Potter, like Shakespeare. And you specifically said after that question, yes, it is like a fairy tale. So that's what I was relating to. You said that.
That particular point that we were talking about, I said, yes, that is like a fairy tale. When you have
so therefore when you say that, I can use that, sir.
Let's clarify. When we have words that have been fabricated and interpolated and changed in complete story, the story of the adulterous woman, a complete fabrication. That's what we were talking about, and that is like Harry Potter because it is indeed a made-up story. So
no, sir, we weren't talking about that. We're talking about.
Do you know where do you even know where that story comes from, Kenny? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous.
In the Bible, I'm not making blanket statements about my position about the Bible. I believe there's some good in the Bible. Okay, I believe there's some truth in the Bible.
Wait, let me ask a kind of interesting question. Can I ask something?
There's a lot of Harry Potter in the Bible, and there's a lot of truth in the Bible.
Let me get you guys back on
track. A lot
track.
of Harry Potter in the Quran and Hadith too.
Wait. This is an interesting question. I think everybody wants to know the answer to this.
Is this about Harry Potter?
No, it's not.
Are you sure?
It's really pressing. It's a pressing issue.
Can I just say one thing before you go, Kareem? Can I
go
just
ahead,
say one
brother.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay, dude, I got to get you a mic. I mean, this idea of you holding this thing up to your face, you got to do something with that. Get a headset, or
yeah.
I mean,
I feel it.
You just like you're out of. I feel the power.
Before we proceed, Eric, I want to thank you for issuing the apology video.
It was the right thing to do. You're right.
Look, hey man.
You know what I did, Kenny? I'm going to tell you. I went out and I bought one of those things, and I used it. And well, it does work, but but it makes the very same sound. So it was the right thing to do. You're absolutely right.
I appreciate that. I can't do anything but respect the man who's willing to make an apology like that. So I totally respect that. You've earned some points in my book. So let's.
Okay. Oh, I won't let it go to my head.
Let's all take a deep breath. I don't want to be rude or insensitive to anyone. I'm not mad at Chris. We're in the midst of discussion that's passionate on both sides, and it's not our objective we're not trying to make enemies with anyone. You guys aren't our enemies here. Okay, so Chris, don't take anything I've said offensive. I'm just trying to address the points. So go ahead, brother.
Am I allowed to address Kareem's question to me now?
Yes, you are.
I got my question. You could remind us, please.
The question was why I don't accept the Hadith as Muhammad seeing Allah, and the reason why I wouldn't is I don't feel that the stories in the Hadith are trustworthy, the same as Muslims don't feel the stories in the Bible are trustworthy.
Okay, I hope you're consistent upon it. But
can I add something to that too?
Yes, you may. And then
okay. What I would say about the Bible and the New Testament, we have 5,838 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, and we have hundreds of them that predate the Council of Nicaea. So when we start looking at the veracity for the New Testament itself, you don't have better attestation in any work from antiquity than the Bible, than the New Testament. When we apply the same standard, let me just finish, Kenny. When you apply that same standard to the Hadith, and we look at the compilation of, let's say, Bukhari, when Bukhari had 600,000 Hadith presented to him, and he whittled them down to 7,200 or whatever the number is. There isn't a rubric that we have for that. Number one. Number two, the Bukhari doesn't start writing until 2 centuries after after Muhammad, and the earliest extant copy of anything that we have from Bukhari is 4 centuries after Muhammad. So when you start making comparisons between the hadith and the New Testament, there really isn't any comparison. The third thing, let me just do number 3 here. Let me just do number 3, and then you guys can comment all you want. When we start looking at the hadith and how the hadith, even the most sahih hadith from Bukhari, contradict the Quran, and how they paint Muhammad in some of the most the most gross things that you can picture a human being doing. The common objection is, okay, these are da'if. They're not trusted hadith, but we can go ahead and trust these other hadiths over there. Okay. But what you're doing is you're not being consistent. Is the problem? You're not being consistent. You say, okay, this is sahih, but you're not going to allow it to be sahih. You're going to say, well, since it's not culturally acceptable today, we're just going to throw it out.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you believe that the hadith are conflicting with the Quran.
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds like you're endorsing the Quran, and I thank you for that. Alhamdulillah. So, but in saying that, so we recognize that the hadith, Eric, is a very complex. It's literally referred to as a science, the science of the hadith.
Where is the rubric for it?
Bear with me 1 second. But so obviously, when words are written by man, you're going to have some things that are absolute absurdities. Some that we know even in the Sahih. In Al-Tabari, matter of fact, Al-Tabari collected all the hadith that he came across, no matter what the source was from, and some of those were known to be fabrications and absolute lies. So the point being is that, yes, I do agree that there are some hadith that are similar to the words of the Bible. Now consider this. I'm not trying to be insulting, but if you believe that the Bible is revealed and influenced by our Creator, but it's been manhandled and tampered with, we can only expect that something that man has his hands in control of is going to be manhandled and tampered with. And so we see evidence of that in the Bible. We do not see that evidence in the Quran. So that's a whole different topic of discussion. But what the point being that Chris was trying to limit initially, and I'll really get back to his point, he was trying to limit the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, seeing our Creator face to face, when in fact, in very authentic hadith with very strong chains of narration, it is talking about the Prophet, peace be upon him, having been in the presence of Allah, and that's the truth. So if we go with our biases, then of course we're cherry picking, and none of us should do that. None of us should do that. So we'll go ahead and get back to Chris and let him finish his statement. I didn't mean to take us off on a.
Well, I actually gave some time to Eric there, and then I never got back to it. So just 2 really quick things. So really quick question for you, Kenny, just to establish this. This is going to be a earth-shattering question here. Is your name Kenny Bomer or Kenny Bomer? Because this is getting crucial now. I mean, sometimes how do you say it?
Depending on who you're talking to, sometimes it's Bomer, sometimes it's Bomber, sometimes it's.
Well, how do you say
it? It's pronounced Bomer. Just like
Bomer.
You hit a
Alhamdulillah, it's pronounced. No, just kidding.
You would hit a homer, and it's Bomer. Okay, so I don't know why people totally exclude the bow part of it. The long.
Well, if Chris mispronounced your name on purpose and called you Bomber, then he gets extra points from me for that sassiness, because he said Kenny Bomber and I called it and I started laughing. So I don't know if he did that on purpose, but okay, we got it established. That's the first one, Kenny Bomer. All right. So the second thing was this. He mentioned, but the hadith. This is interesting that they have spent so much time, for the first time probably I've ever seen, as far as what I've witnessed from them actually defending the science of hadith and warning Muslims, you got to watch out. These hadiths are not reliable. But on their show, they'll dive into any hadith that comes to them that makes Muhammad look bad. Aisha, how old was she? Wars, the Jews, 600 Jews killed. All of these things that are not referred to in detail in the Quran, they have no problem, except they'll never warn anybody about, you gotta really pick out the hadith. Never tell anybody that. So okay, but that's the other thing. But in closing, I want to say this. In the Quran, Claus is asking Nadir, to produce something that the Quranic narrative denies that's even possible. That is that anyone could be face to face with God. That's one of the things the Quran takes the initiative to really address man and redirect their understanding to the true understanding that no one in their mortal flesh can be face to face with God. Therefore, the closest thing possible to that would be what we find in the hadith, and that is that the prophet, he ascended to the heavens, and that's where he received the order for the 5 daily prayers, and we know the story. So if a Muslim just hearing this debate heard Chris say that, he would consider it a lie, because if he delved into his understanding of the whole Islamic story, the story is no one can actually be face to face with God. So what would that mean, though, in a way that's closest to that? It would be actually what the prophet did, ascending all the way through the heavens and being in the presence of God. That would be the closest thing. So
it doesn't necessarily mean that Chris would be lying about the point. I don't mean to interrupt you, brother. It doesn't necessarily mean that he'd be lying about the point. He could be ignorant about the night of the ascension. But if he is aware of the night of the ascension, which I'm not calling him a liar, but I think he is aware of the story about the night of the ascension. I think he's been doing this long enough that he is aware of it. So to exclude it is a bit disingenuous. And that's why I was trying to say, okay, in my mind, I'm thinking Chris knows better than this. He knows better
about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Just since everybody's talking about me, can I have a little bit of it in here?
Sure, I tried to go to you a moment ago. Go ahead.
Well, everybody's talking about me like I'm not in the room instead of just asking me what I'm actually saying.
It's so important, Chris. Go ahead.
All right. So, yes, I acknowledge the Hadith is literature. I acknowledge the stories in the Hadith. Okay? That doesn't mean that I have to accept the stories in the Hadith as being truthful. The same as Muslims don't take the stories in the Bible to be truthful. By the same standard, I can look at the Hadith that way. What I'm doing is I'm giving the Muslim an out, really, because a Muslim's not giving that out to the Christian. When a Muslim tells a Christian, I want to see evidence, and they go to the Bible, and they go to the Bible, right? The Muslim is going to say, well, that's corrupted. We don't accept that. Show me something, especially the death of Jesus. A lot of people want to go outside of the Bible for us to prove secular sources that Jesus actually died by crucifixion. But yet they don't do the same thing when it goes to their Hadith. And what I'm doing is I'm pointing out the double standard and not allowing Muslims to use that double standard anymore. So if you're saying that we cannot trust the Bible, then I'm saying we cannot trust the Hadith.
Well, can I
That was about 38 seconds, Chris, if you got there. You got about 38 seconds is what you got.
Bear with me just 1 second. Okay, so for one, my first question would be, should we not reject something that we know it has fabrications within it? Now, you've equated the Bible with that of the Hadith, which we know that the Hadith has some known fabrications in it, some just bizarre stories. And I thank you for.
Hey, Kenny, how do you know that though?
Yeah,
may
I add my 2 cents
yes,
very quickly?
1 second, even Anwar. Let me make this point.
Yeah, sure.
Briefly. So once again, the Hadith are words that are written according to man. We won't get into the science behind it. They're words according to man. Some of those, thank you for recognizing, some of those are very odd and very bizarre stories that, we reject. Okay, alhamdulillah, we reject that. Should we not? Should we not? When we know it's inconsistent with what the Quran states, like Eric endorsed the Quran earlier, and I thank you for that. So we should reject the Hadith that are inconsistent with the Quran, and that's exactly the position that we take as Muslims. In the same light, when we look at the Bible, we know it's words that are written according to man. Okay, and in those writings of the Bible, we have many fabricated stories. The story of the adulterous woman, the longer ending of Mark, so we have stories that shouldn't be there. Should we not, if we're trying to be sincere seekers of the truth, should we not reject things that we know have been tampered with? And so the Bible, words according to man, Hadith, words according to man, We have to put it on the scales and try to extract the good from each one of those sources and reject those things that are inconsistent with what our God would reveal. So
yeah, but the thing is that you don't do that though, Kenny, because even in the earliest sources that we
Chris, I'm
have of
telling
the
you that's
Bible,
what I do.
it actually identifies the death of Jesus.
Chris, I'm telling you that's what I do. Okay, so you're trying to rely upon the earliest sources saying that they're that of Jesus, okay? But there's other sources that are in conflict with what the Bible states, and we'll get even Anwar is
No, but because you reject the Bible and the authors and whatnot, because you seem to think that there's stories that aren't true in it.
Chris. If
So
I had a
you're going to
roadmap,
say that. No,
if
let
I
me
had
finish, sir. You actually just had a little bit of time. Let me finish.
well,
But you said because there's stories that are supposedly not supposed to be in the Bible, you're going to then say, well, we have to subtract what's good and what's not from it. But we don't know how to do that if you're a Muslim, because the only criteria you're going to use is the Quran, which what you should use is the earliest. I'm still going to finish, Kenny. What you need to use is the earliest sources and what it says and what agrees with it, right? So what we know is that Jesus did die by crucifixion, but you're willing to throw that out as it being an interpolation of the scriptures, being added into the scriptures when it really isn't. When we look at the Hadith, we see that there's stories that are in the Hadith that shouldn't be. So at that point, we should get rid of it all, right? Just like you do with the Bible.
Didn't say that. I didn't say that we get rid of the Bible. I told you that from both sources. I specifically
Tell me what's true from the Bible, please.
We should extract what's good in there that would be consistent with what our God would reveal. That's the very last thing that I said. So no, I didn't say
extract it, please, sir.
Hold on, Chris. I didn't say just throw the whole book away. As a matter of fact, a few shows ago I talked about a period in my life when the Bible helped me through some issues. So I believe some of it there's some good in there, and I believe that some of it's been tampered with. My point being, as a Muslim, is that I can't fully trust the Bible because it's like fully trusting a roadmap that you know for sure that someone at some point has gone in there and changed some of the roads and the map itself. And so how can I rely upon a map that I know has been tampered with? How can I trust it fully? And I simply can't. When I look at the Bible,
prove me wrong, Kenny.
that's the perspective that
Quote
I take.
one verse you believe is in the New Testament that you believe Allah revealed. Quote one verse.
Hear, O Israel, our Lord, our God is Lord.
I said in the New Testament, sir.
In the New Testament, that's from the New Testament, sir. Jesus, peace be upon him, you're the one you call God, repeating the words of Moses, of the prophets, and saying, "Hear, O Israel, our Lord, our God is one." That is basically that is the Shahada, La ilaha illallah. So I totally accept that. I totally believe that. Jesus, peace be upon him, says John 17:3 when he says, "And this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent." I totally believe that Jesus.
So you believe that verse from John is a part of the original Injil?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
yes, you have to.
Something that Jesus would have said. I didn't say anything about it being a part of the original.
So now you're denying the authenticity of the verse. Thank you very much for proving my point.
I'm not going to let you conflate the issue. What I specifically said is that I believe that that is something that Jesus, peace be upon him, would have said. I didn't say that I believe that is part of the Injil.
I told you to give me one verse that your Allah revealed in the Injil.
Hold on. Listen. I believe that, for one, we don't have record of anything that Jesus said in the Injil. Okay, that's something that he was given. The Injil was given to him by Allah. Okay, you know this, we know this. Okay, let's not make an issue about that. But
no, we don't know this. You guys claim this.
Brother, let me clarify my point. You asked a specific question about whether or not I believe that Jesus would have said such a thing as, "Here, this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent." Well, that's the same as a Muslim saying, "I bear witness there's no God other than Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his final messenger." Jesus declared the Shahada in 17:3, and it was the Shahada. Think what is the Shahada? I bear witness that there's only one God, and I believe that Moses is the prophet of Allah, Abraham, Muhammad, Noah, I believe they're all
Not the
prophets of Allah.
Shahada. That's not the
Well,
Shahada.
it equates to the Shahada, Eric.
It's not the
Does it not?
Shahada, though, and you know this. What you're doing is you're inventing things in order to make it accommodate to your theology.
Upon him, who you say is God says, okay? He makes a clear distinction, proving that he's not in 17:3. This is eternal life. That's salvation. This is how to get to heaven, that they know you, recognize you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. Okay, so he makes a clear distinction. This is eternal life. They know you, the only true God. He puts himself out of the mix in being God, and if they recognize me, who you have
I would
sent.
like to go to the entire chapter. If you want to recite it in context, that would be great. I got a couple things that I wanted to ask,
I think I
though.
made my point clear. That is typically.
I know what your point is, Kenny. I've heard it several times. I know what it is. I get it. I get it.
Right. So that is quote unquote the Shahada that Jesus is declaring. He's declaring the oneness of our Creator, and he's declaring himself as the prophet of our Creator.
And no, he's not.
Shadow Allah, ilaha illallah, the shadow Allah, Jesus, a Rasulullah.
But Kenny, do you believe?
I just want to know where this Injil is. That's my question. Where is this Injil? Do we have any extant copies of it?
Wait. Let me get into that.
I mean,
I've heard him say
cited
that a couple times. Could I address Eric?
I'd like to see. Okay, well, when you do this, Kareem, please make sure that you cite references, please.
No. It's
no. You can't say that there's an Injil that existed and not
hear me out
before
it. Hear me out, because I may not need it. Maybe we'll just connect logically, and you'll understand what I'm getting at. All right. So in the Bible, are there any stories that have no outside evidence to them that would cause you to believe in them, except that they were mentioned in the Bible?
Say that one more time. I'm not.
Is there any instances in the Bible where there's stories that are claimed or happenings that were supposedly occurring upon the earth, which we have no other evidence for them ever happening?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's stories in the Bible that we do not have extra biblical evidence.
May I interject?
Stories
Sorry,
are different.
I'm sure you know what I'm getting with.
Step on me.
I'm sure you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, before
I'm gonna let
Kareem continues, because we might jump to something else, right? I just want to address something that was discussed just moments ago. It is interesting that Claus is saying that he's questioning Muslims who question the reliability of the Bible, but would not want to question the reliability of the Hadith, which is a false characterization. We not only question the Hadith, we reject more than 1 million Hadith. One such Hadith, for example, if I can just quote from memory, لو خشع قلب هذا خشعت جوارحه. Right, this is one example of fabricated hadith, that if the heart of someone who is attentive, then the whole of his body is attentive. It sounds very nice. It sounds very nice. It is in reference perhaps to Salah, when you're doing your worship according to our belief system, you're supposed to be in full attentiveness, focusing on God. So this narration, supposed to be a hadith, it sounds good, but we reject it. Why? Because when we apply one of the methods by which we measure whatever narration that comes to us, which is called Jarhu wa Ta'dil, we look at the sanad, the chain of transmission, we look at the matan, and if they fail any of the principles that have been formulated by our scholars throughout the ages, then they are rejected. But it is interesting that you're comparing the hadith with the Bible. By doing that and by insisting that we make such a comparison, you are in actual fact saying that the Bible is not entirely reliable. Because hadith by definition is not entirely reliable.
That's right.
So now, thank you for affirming that the Bible is on
Can
par.
I explain how Ibn's wrong after he's done, please?
The hadith, because we do have fabricated things found in the Bible, attested by Bibles themselves. So if I were to open now the NIV, if I were to now open the RSV, look simply at
am I allowed to respond to what you said so far, Ibn, or are you just
I think Chris, we get like 5 minutes to 1. I don't think we get a lot of time here. I'm just saying.
Sure. But I just came in, right? So sure, you can reply. But
so
again,
should I actually respond to what you said, Ibn, or are you just going to keep talking?
Go ahead.
Actually,
ahead.
so when you say that I'm comparing the Hadith to the Bible, that's completely wrong. Now, the
But you
reason
just
why that's wrong is because you're using the comparison wrong. What I said is Muslims look at the Bible and say that it is a fairy tale, and I quoted Kenny Bomer when he actually stated it on his podcast.
Chris,
Then,
we were talking about a particular.
oh my God, Kenny, am I going to finish or no?
Yes, but I can't let you take it out of
I
context.
am not going to. I'm not going to come on this podcast anymore.
I
If
would
you're just
say
going to
that- I would
interrupt
say
me.
that- I would
This
say
is the
the
sixth
same
time
thing
I've taken the
about-
mic, and this is the sixth time you've interrupted me.
Listen, Chris. Listen. I can't let you make a statement like that and not address
People
it.
can look at your podcast.
What about the last
won't-
fellow
it
who
won't
made
take
some
10
inaccurate statements
It won't
too? I
take
mean, are you
10
going to let him do that too? I mean,
It won't take 10 seconds.
it's hypocrisy.
I
Come
would
on,
make
Kenny.
the same- I would say I would make the same proclamation about any
Oh my God.
that I know have been fabricated. I would equate that to Harry Potter. Okay, so let's put. I already put this on the scales of reason, logic, and reason. Okay, I reject those things that I know are fabrications, just as we should, and equate that to Harry Potter.
No, that's
And-
fine. Because when
No,
you say
I'm
that
going
Harry,
to finish.
when you
Ibn.
say that Harry
Ibn,
Potter
I'm
is
going to finish, not you, sir.
sure, go ahead.
Am I actually allowed to speak, Kenny? And can I
Yes,
have a
yes,
full
but
3
I
minutes without
can't
being
allow you
interrupted?
not to change
Again, you're
your
interrupting me.
context.
Can I
If-
have my
yes.
full 3 minutes? You've went to our platform before and said that we do not give you time, and that if we come to your platform,
even
that
go
you
there.
will give us
Don't
time
even go
and
there.
not interrupt us.
Don't
Every
even
time
go
that
there.
I
We
try
get
to speak,
recording after
you've
recording.
interrupted me in this podcast.
Chris, I'm interrupting you because you made a comment that makes no logical sense. When I
Okay,
made
I'm going to make this make
Here.
sense, Kenny.
Listen, I
When
made
we
my
were on your
clear. I'm
podcast,
not gonna let
and we
you
were speaking,
misrepresent
let
me.
me finish, Kenny.
I will not let you misrepresent me. I said quite clearly, rather, if I find hadith that are fabricated, I'm going to equate that with Harry Potter. And if I find stories within the Bible that are fabricated, I'm going to equate that with Harry Potter. That doesn't mean that I reject all of the hadith, and it does not mean that I reject all of the Bible. So don't speak for me. Let me clarify my position. You don't put words in my mouth. Plain and simple. Now go ahead.
Conversation about, and you said that it was a fairy tale, right? What were we talking about? What was the topic of conversation?
Chris, this is Chris, quite simple.
Would you agree the topic of conversation was Muhammad being prophesied in the previous scripture?
Are you talking about something from a week ago when we could be talking about the topic today?
Sir, I'm pointing towards how you're misrepresenting what you stated. In our discussion a week ago, we were talking about Muhammad being prophesied in the previous scripture. And I said, if you use that as a prophecy about your prophet, you must accept that it is a part of the original Injil. If you don't believe it's part of the original Injil, it's like saying it's like being in the book of Harry Potter. And you stated that, yes, it is a fairy tale. So you even...
What are you talking about? You're on another planet.
You admitted...
You are on a complete
other You admitted that the prophecies that you use, even in John, you view as a fairy tale. That's exactly what you said on your podcast.
Chris, I made it clear. Everyone who's listening, I'll say it once again for Chris. If I find something in Hadith that is inconsistent with the Quran and it's known fabrications, I will reject it and call it similar to Harry Potter.
No, yeah, it's fine. It's fine to call. It's fine to call.
You were using a prophecy about your prophet in the previous scriptures and calling that a fairy tale.
I've clarified my position 5 times.
That's what you were doing, Kenny.
A book can be a fairy tale. A book can be a fairy tale. A book can be labeled a fairy tale and yet impart authentic information, correct information. So Harry Potter is a fairy tale,
again, Kenny,
but even though it's a fairy tale, when it mentions London, we know London exists. When it mentions King's Cross, we know it exists.
Okay,
right?
See you later. Get that absurdity out of here. Complete nonsense. I made my position clear, which is something that we should all do and be sincere when seeking the truth. Okay, you find what's reliable and from trustworthy sources, and you hold on to that. Okay.
No, I want him to come. I want him to come back because he's trying
He's
to.
not going to come back. If you keep stepping on him, he's not going to come back. When you don't allow a man to talk, he's not going to come back.
I did allow him to talk, but of course,
No, you
Kenny
did
and him was
not.
going,
You kept interrupting
Kenny and him
him.
was
It
going.
is clear as day. People are going to replay this video and they're going to see that you guys kept interrupting. Every time he made a comment, you guys interrupted him.
What they're going to find is he's not.
No, I did not interrupt him.
Yes, you did.
He's not.
Well, once or twice, as everybody was interrupting each other, just as you were interrupting me just moments ago, just a few seconds ago, because this is going back and forth. It's not a moderated collegiate debate we're having now. It's an open discussion. So I wasn't purposefully stepping on him.
Side to present itself. If somebody was to go back, let me just say this: if somebody was to go back and replay this video, Kenny, I just want to make a point.
Go back 1,000 times. Go back and watch it, and you'll see that I interrupted the man when he tried to misrepresent.
And I agree. Okay, I see what you're doing, and I get that, and I know the desire to want to do that as a host of a show. But what I'm saying is if we were to go back and we're going to look at this discussion that we're having here, and see the amount of time that was given to somebody that has an opposing view of Islam versus your show. It's like 10-1. I mean, you're not giving anybody any time any time to talk without being interrupted.
You can make that claim, but that's absurdity.
I'll do it. I'll take the time to do it. I'll go back there and I'll sit there and I'll watch the stuff, Kenny, and I'll send it to you.
I want you to do that. And what you're going to find is what I tried to prevent the man from doing is misrepresenting me, such as I say I walked into a bank, and Chris explains it that I walked into a bank and I robbed the bank. Well, no, if the man starts telling people that I walked into the bank and I robbed the bank, then I'm going to have to stop him in his track and say, oh, no, I didn't rob the bank. I just simply told you that I walked into the bank. And that's the scenario that we have here.
If I did that to you on my show, what would you accuse me of?
I clarified my position quite clearly 5, maybe 6 times. If I find something that is inconsistent with what the truth is, and we know that it's a fabrication, of course we got to reject it. Of course we got to compare it.
Right. I agree with that. But okay, here's my point though, is if we were to do that to you on my show and interrupt you as many times as you interrupted and I'm just saying you would be upset too, and you would let us know.
I've got recordings. I've got every one of those recordings. I've seen what y'all did to Asana last week. Let's not talk about yesterday. We're talking about
Asana. I feel bad for Asana too, because did you see that? Did you see the show last week with Asana?
The show last week, and I seen he was frustrated.
I know Asana was like hangry. We can hear you, Nadir, but Asana was hangry. I mean, he was. Because when he comes on my show, he's normally very cordial and polite and engaging.
He was a bit upset.
He was because and I get it. It's because it's Ramadan, and when you get hungry, you're hungry. You get angry.
Might I get a word in just very quickly?
Why he was upset?
Yeah,
he was upset because those tactics that y'all used there, y'all have brought here. Chris didn't want to be quiet. Let me clear my point. Right? He wanted to keep going and try to misrepresent me. Over and over and over and over and over again. When 6, 7 times I made it clear about what I meant and what I stated in regards to the Harry Potter statement. If something's a fabrication in a story that's made up, I'm going to call it a fabrication in a story that's made up. And is Harry Potter a fabrication story made up? Absolutely. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
It's a good story.
Also,
I'll tell you that. It is a really good story. You have to admit that.
It is.
I mean, have you seen the movies? For crying out loud, that's really good.
Yeah, when it talks about dragons and unicorns, very, very good, narratives there.
It is good. But, I mean, especially the zapping of Baltimore.
Well, this is the first time I'm meeting you. Right? Are you Eric?
I am.
Eric? Oh, okay. I've heard a lot about you, so this is the first time I'm meeting you.
It's not all bad.
No, not at all. Now I'm seeing you. I'm meeting you for the first time. I see that you're a very cordial person. You seem to be very nice and all that. But as for myself, you were saying that I was interrupting your friend there, Chris Claus.
You were.
I've known him for quite a long time. Back on Pal Talk, I used to talk and communicate with him a lot. And yes, I did interrupt him, but. Not blatantly, simply because he's a Christian and I want to get into a fight with him or into a brawl with him. No, I myself was interrupted as I came in, and when I tried to jump into the discussion, right, I was interrupted blatantly so, and of course I jumped in, and Kenny, as the host of the show, had the right to do that. He quieted me. What did he do? He muted me. several times. So the caricature that you were trying to paint there of Kenny, simply manhandling non-Muslim guests would be inaccurate,
didn't
because
say
just as
that. I didn't say
it sounded like that. But just as I came in, I got
Sorry.
muted several times
And
by
also,
Kenny, and also when I wanted to jump in, because I had to reboot myself, when I came back in, and so that the discussion was going on, but then it seemed to me like as if it was going somewhere else. So and I wanted to stop that. What did I do? I jumped in, and who was speaking then? It wasn't any Christian. It was Kareem. Kareem was speaking, so I interrupted him. It wasn't a Christian, you see. So the image that you were trying to paint of Muslims here in this room oppressing Christians is not a very accurate presentation, is it?
and especially
I'm not saying that Muslims in this room are trying to oppress Christians. I didn't say that.
Marshall, he hasn't been back. I had to remove him because he was stepping in on a key point that it needed to be clarified, and I had to remove him. And so
Let me show you something about Marshall. Kenny, I got this email from Marshall this past week, and I tell you what, it is like gold. And I emailed him, and I thanked him for it, because it told what he did was he this is 4 pages long of how to promote my show. So whatever, I don't know whatever you told him. I appreciate that.
Let me make a point about that, because sincerely, he talked to me about that last night. And he was genuinely and sincerely trying to help you with that, and that's, we talked about it.
And the thing is I hope so. I really do, because him and I have had a long history, and it has not been pleasant. I'll tell you that.
That I sent you. Let's put all the nonsense from yesterday. Let's forget about that.
I would love to.
Be civil with one another. I mean, we're going to have discussions, but let's do it at the end of the day. Have a smile on the face and realize that we're only engaging in stuff that we're passionate about. Let's not make enemies of one another. That's not the objective here. I don't want that, and I hope no one perceives me as that way. But the brother he's very kind-hearted. He's truly kind-hearted, and I'm not just saying that. The man he's a very kind-hearted brother. He told me specifically that he was trying to sincerely help you. I think that's his way, trying to bridge the gap there and trying to make a little bit of peace. Okay, so, but in regards to him, I did have to kick him out earlier because, no offense, brother, I know you're probably listening right now.
But coming back to the subject matter, right? So from what I can gather from the little that I heard, our friend Claus was making a similitude between the Hadith and the Bible. Do you disagree with that? And then, of course, when he saw the problem with doing that, as I presented to him, the difficulty that would arise from such an enterprise, he started recapitulating something that happened some time ago last week, which I wasn't even part of, so I didn't know what I was trying to do there. But in your estimation, from whatever that he was trying to talk about with regards to the Hadith and the Bible, was he not actually making a comparison between the two?
Was he making a comparison between the Hadith and the Bible? Is that what you're asking?
Was he? Yeah. Was he not asking us?
I think he was trying to draw. Yeah, I think he was trying to draw the differences in the application of both of them. I think is what he was trying to do, and I don't think anybody was allowing him to do that. When you look at the Bible and how we look and how we perceive what we have in the New Testament and sacred Scripture, we're allowed to criticize it. We're allowed to go in there and say, okay, Kenny's brought up several times a woman that was caught in adultery. Well, we know that this was an insertion. This was a story that was an insertion.
Yeah.
We know that this was an insertion into the Gospel of John. Why? Because we have previous copies of Gospels of John. We have a multiplicity of previous copies of the Gospel of John that shows that this story wasn't in there. But as Christians, what we're allowed to do is we're allowed to go, well, why was this story in there? Well, we know the story that is inserted in there is because of one of the disciples of John, Papias, mentions the story in his writings when we go to the early church fathers. Now, when you make this comparison to the Hadith, and I want to make sure I say this again, when you make the comparison to the Hadith were not written down for 200 years. And when you read some of these...
Yeah, continue, sir.
Okay, so when you look at the Hadith, they were not written down for 200 years. And all that it is, if you read it and you say it's a science, I don't think there's anything that is a science of hearsay. It is so and so said so and so said so and so, and so said so and so, and that's all it is. And when we look at, can I share my screen, Kenny?
Sure.
Okay, let me share my screen here. Wait a second. Let me do this. Okay. Wait a second.
While you're bringing that up,
No. Here it is. Share screen. Here we go.
Yeah, share that. From my standpoint, it is referred to as the science of the hadith.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Might I
I've never
respond?
seen a rubric for that, which is kind of
Sure.
weird, but
Sure.
it's not
So
responding.
thank you,
It's not
Eric.
allowing
So
me
you've raised a few things, right? So you
Can I
question.
finish though at all, or
Okay, sure, you can.
it's not allowing me to share my screen, and my screen is frozen for some reason. Let me do this. Okay, there. Can you see that?
Hold on one second.
No, I'm not seeing anything. Okay,
Okay.
well, right.
Okay, this
Yeah.
is okay. This is a hadith.
Okay.
Here's my point. When we start evaluating the hadith,
Right.
and you say, well, okay, this hadith throughout the epics of time has been declared to be sahih, but now modern science clearly demonstrates that Muhammad was making this up as he went along. What Muslims do, as in this case, is they're saying, no, this is clearly a da'if. This is clearly a weak hadith. This is clearly something that we can tell, and obviously so, that is not true, because when Muhammad goes down here and says that a child resembles its parents based on which parents has an orgasm first during intercourse, we know that this is simply not true. But one other thing that I would point out about this one hadith, notice that Muhammad said Gabriel, the same angel that came to him and delivered the Quran to him, is saying the same exact thing. Gabriel has just come to me and delivered this. So when we start looking at, okay, you're saying that there's a science to hadith, and the Quran is definitely from God. How do you make that determination? Right. How do you make this tell the difference, especially in light of something?
Sure.
Like
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. So you've raised a few things here. First, you have sort of contradicted yourself. You came along, tried to establish your position that the hadith literature is unreliable.
It is. It is unreliable because it's written down 200 years after the fact.
Yeah, sure. Allow me to respond to the things that you've raised. So that one of the reasons for its unreliability, according to you, is because it's written 200 years after. But then towards the end, you showed us a text of hadith, and then you said that Muhammad got it wrong, as though it's a fact that Muhammad related it and it has been preserved in the way that it is, and it is indeed from Muhammad. So now you can't have your cake and eat it at the same time.
Well, neither can you. That's
hold
the
on
thing.
a moment.
That's my point.
Allow me
you
to
can't
finish.
have it. You can't have it.
Now you're interrupting me.
Too.
Now you're interrupting me, sir. Now you're interrupting me.
Go ahead, but I mean, it's the same thing.
Allowing me to finish. Right. So first, you're saying that the hadith can't be accepted because there's no way of finding out its reliability. It's written 200 years after the fact, too long of a gap between the source and when it was penned down. But now you've contradicted yourself by saying that, yeah, we can actually find reliable information. Look at this one hadith, for example. Muhammad did actually say this, and he was wrong. Science has proven him wrong. So you can't have your cake and
This isn't just one. There's several to go along with it.
Sure. So you are saying that in hadith literature, we do have, whether it's wrong or not, that is a different matter. What you are essentially saying that we do have within hadith literature correct information from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is historically verifiable. Well, you just
never said that.
Yeah, you just did.
And there's a lot of things within the hadith that I know that is
by stating that the Prophet Muhammad did actually say
location of Mecca, for example.
You're interrupting me again by saying that the Prophet Muhammad did actually.
I thought that was that a question.
No, that was rhetorical. So the fact that you've said that the Prophet Muhammad said it and science has proven him wrong, you are actually giving us the point that the Prophet Muhammad did say this, and this, at least this part of hadith, is verifiable. It is authentic. It is from the Prophet Muhammad. So that you've got it wrong. Can I
say something about that? Can I say something
hold on a moment.
That?
With regards to the word science, the science of hadith, you have a problem with that. Why is it called science? Yeah, you're conflating the word science that we use in the natural sciences like biology, etc., with, say, the human sciences. There is a department in university called the human sciences. Now, in Arabic, what is the word for science? For example, when we talk about the science of hadith, what is the Arabic term for that?
For science?
Do you know? No, I'm asking Eric. Do you know the Arabic, the technical term for hadith studies? What do we call it in Arabic? Hadith studies. So, for example, if you go to Georgetown University, where you find Jonathan Brown, right?
Off on now.
So there is a department there called the study of hadith, hadith studies department. So in Arabic, if you were to translate that, what would you call that?
I don't know. We have departments of theology. Do you think that everything
Okay,
comes out of them is true or not? I mean, it doesn't. I mean, what you're doing is you're conflating terms here. Is all you're doing.
You are doing that.
It is a dishonest form of
what we would call that department is ulum al hadith, from the singular ilm, which literally means knowledge. But it is typically translated even by Christian scholars when they're dealing with the hadith studies as sciences of hadith. Not that science is the same as biology. We're not saying that.
So let's just cut to the chase. How do you determine if a hadith is true or not? How do you make that determination?
Through a sub-science of ulum al-hadith called ilm al-jarh wa ta'dil.
I don't want to know the terms. I want to know the steps, the process, the rubric involved here. I want to know the rubric Sahih al-Bukhari used in order to determine what was.
The different muhaddithin have different criteria. Some of the criteria are the same, but they would differ. Some are very strict on how they accept hadith, and that is their own judgment. We call ijtihad, right? Some others are loose in their acceptance of this or that hadith, but there's a criteria that are found. These criteria are found in what is called ilm jarh wa ta'dil, where the sanad is criticized. Literally, that is what it means. The sanad, the chain of transmission, is criticized, and the matan, the mutun, the texts are criticized.
Right, and where are those texts? Where can I find those texts?
There are principles behind that.
Where can I find those texts? I'm asking you a direct question. Where can I find those texts?
You mean the steps, the criteria?
No, the text that you are citing that are used in the hadith as scientifically verifiable. I want to know where those texts are.
Scientifically verifiable? No. Again, you're misusing the term science.
No, I'm not using them as terming. When you start throwing, hold on just a second, Kenny. When you start throwing out these terms as far as textual criticism,
when you say scientifically, scientifically implies empirical. The empirical method, the scientific method, that is not the method that we use.
But when we start using the textual criticism, when we start applying the textual criticism to any text, whether it be the
textual criticism is a science also, but it is not the same as biology. Continue. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I finish? Good Lord, can I finish, please?
Of course you can.
1 second, because the terms, I think you would have to agree that textual criticism, just like the brother just mentioned, it's a form of science.
And that's the point I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so you agree that textual criticism is a science of textual criticism in the same way, the exact same way, as a matter of fact, other than the use of the verbs and the punctuation and those things. But what he's trying to explain to you is that the science of the hadith fall in line with the same principles. It's not actual science.
It's not the same principles as if you would apply it to the New Testament at all. It's something completely different.
No, brother, it's not. It's not.
It is. It is, because what you're doing is you're using hearsay, and what we're doing is we're trying to go back to the first century documents. Is what we're trying to do.
No, it's the science of studying.
The whole point of hadith is to sift hearsay from actual credible statements of the Prophet Muhammad.
And how do you determine if somebody is credible? How do you determine if somebody is actual? How do you make this determination if somebody did in fact write it down when you don't have any extant copies? That is the point I'm trying to make. There is nothing.
We do not.
Let me finish. You have nothing prior to Bukhari. You have nothing prior to Muslim.
That's false. That is false.
Go ahead, cite. No. Cite.
Wahab ibn Munabbih. We also have.
I want you to put in the chat here. I want to see. Hold on. I want to see. I want to see the extant copies of these ahadith that predate Bukhari and Muslim.
Sure.
Put it in the chat, and I will shut my mouth.
Yeah. No. First of all, first of all, you have to understand we do not rely only on manuscripts. You're making
You
a
rely on
false-
hearsay, is what you do.
No. I rely on,
Yes,
for
you
example,
do.
when,
No,
for
you
example,
rely on
when,
hearsay. That's
for
hearsay
example,
evidence in a court of law.
when I say the Quran reads in Surah Al-Ikhlas, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Is that hearsay? Am I reading from something? No, I'm reading from memory. Am I wrong? No, of course you can check it out
Well,
against.
how do you know you're right if you're reading from memory? How do you know that is the exact copy of what was written down earlier?
By
How do you know
comparing my recitation to the recitation of someone in China.
And how
who
do
would
they know?
recite
And how do they know the same
would,
thing?
and I would not know that person. That
And
person would compare it to someone in Europe.
That's exactly
That
the
person would
point.
compare it to
There's
someone in
nobody.
Europe.
You don't
And
have
someone
that
from
proof,
Europe-
and that's the thing.
Someone from
That's
Europe
what I'm
who
asking
doesn't,
for. Is I'm asking
someone
for the
from
proof.
Europe who doesn't know anyone from Africa would compare it from someone in Africa. That's how we know it. Independent.
Where do we have that written down? Where do we have that written
attestation.
down? Where can I find that extant
Independent
copy?
attestation. That is.
I'm asking you
if
to post it in
if you're-
chat.
if you're
I've
familiar
asked you
with
to post it in chat, and you
if
haven't
you're
done it
familiar with
yet.
textual criticism at all, then you will know that even according to conservatives, when they're dealing with the Gospels, they say that the Gospels contain what? Oral tradition. For example, when Jesus says, "It has been said to you of old," this is based on oral tradition. Do you
No,
have?
it hasn't. What he's doing is he's citing Old Testament.
No. The words of
Yes, he
Jesus.
is. Yes, he is.
Jesus. The words
Yes,
of
he is.
Jesus
He's
is based
citing
on
the Old
oral.
Testament is what he's doing.
The
I know
words of
what you're trying to do here.
The
Go
words
ahead.
of Jesus is oral tradition that the author of the gospel is penning down. But you cannot now produce to us the person who has given that particular oral tradition. Can you? No, what
Yes,
you
I
can
can.
do is
I can give you the Gospel of John. I give you John, the disciple John. He has witnesses. We have the early
No,
church fathers that attest. Yes, we do. We have the early church fathers that attest to what John
John
did.
is not a disciple of
that
Jesus.
is
The book of
your
John
claim.
was
Say him
written by
again. Say, Kenny, what did you just say?
I said the book of John was not written by a disciple of Jesus. Period.
Oh,
Period.
really?
No,
Okay. Well, I guess there's really no point in trying to discuss this with you any further if you're going to make that. Okay. So Kenny, let me ask you this, Kenny. I don't know who this other guy is. Let me ask you, Kenny.
Sure, ask me.
Who was Polycarp referring to when he wrote in the first century? Who was Ignatius? No, hold on, let me finish. Who was Irenaeus? Who was Papias
Do you
referring
have
to?
manuscripts from Polycarp from the time that he wrote it? Do you? What's
We have
the oldest?
well, it's just like everything else. We have copies of what was written. Of course, we have copies.
Copies from what is the date of that? The
I'm not
oldest that you
exactly
have extant manuscript, you don't know.
Probably
So
mid second century, I would think would be the earliest.
how many manuscripts of the entire New Testament do you have from the second century?
From the second century, I think that you have P52. I know that's from the Gospel of John. I can't.
P52.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, that's P52 from John. Yeah, we know that's one.
But this
125. 125.
Right,
no,
but it's kind of odd that it lines
more
up completely with what we have today. That's
not
the weird
necessarily.
thing.
Not
Oh yes,
necessarily.
yeah, necessarily. And I'm not exactly sure what the other documents are from the second century.
Sure. Not more than 10. Not more than 10 manuscripts of the entire New Testament.
And do you know why that is? Do you know why that is?
Whatever the reason is,
Do you know why that is?
Whatever the reason is, what you have now capitulated.
It doesn't matter to you what the reason is, of course.
To us is that
I asked you a direct question. Do you know why the reason is?
Yeah. What you have capitulated here is almost 200 years went by, and we do not have tangible evidence, extant manuscripts of the things that you say is authentic, namely the New Testament. And based on your own
that's
testimony,
not true. That's just not true. I mean, you can say it, but it's just not true.
Based on your own testimony, if something comes 200 years after, and we do not have extant manuscripts of
it comes 400 years after before we even have a copy of what Bukhari wrote. So that's the point I was getting to, but you never let me get to it.
The very fact that we do not have anything for 95% of the entire New Testament for the first 200 years of Christianity means that the New Testament, according to you, must be rejected.
No, that's not. That's a complete misrepresentation. It's a debating tactic. I get it. It's a debating tactic, and this is what you're trying to do. But it's absolutely not true. When we look at Bukhari, and the point I was trying to make to Bukhari, are you going to talk over me the whole time? I'm going to try to answer your question or not.
Of the New Testament with that.
Do I get to make a point, Kenny, at all? I mean,
Do you have?
do I
you have
just
more
have to
than-
sit there and listen to this? I mean,
Talk over each other. I mean,
No, we're
well, that's, I'm trying to answer him, but he just won't. He won't accept anything that I say. He just keeps talking, and that's
All right, let me open my site. Right, I've actually transcribed P52. Hold on a moment.
care about P52. You asked me for a citation. I cited it for you. It lines up perfectly what we have today in the extant copies of John. But my
Eric,
point,
it's this big. It's this big.
okay.
It's this big, man.
Notice it has something on the backside too. Did you notice that?
It doesn't matter.
It lines up completely with what we have in John, in the Gospel of John.
Listen, man, it's credit card size. It's this big. I mean, what you're going to base your belief on something that's got some scribbles on it the size of a credit card? Something that you know has interpolation.
Can I finish?
This woman, the word begotten shouldn't be there. It was not written by.
It's not there. You know that.
It was not written by.
That's an English word. That's an English translation word. Okay, let me just say this.
Okay.
When we look at Bukhari doesn't write anything down for 200 years. We do not have any extant copies of Bukhari for another 200 years. So you're talking 4 centuries after the life of Muhammad. You're relying on a hadith from Bukhari and you're calling it Sahih. When we look at the New Testament, and I mentioned this early in the show, we have 5,838 copies.
Most of which come after 1,000 years.
2.5.
They do. I mean, they all.
Eric, let's see how much you actually know about the manuscripts. Within the first 1,000 years of Christianity, how many of the 5,000 or so manuscripts that you have mentioned are actually found? How many? Do you know? Within the first 1,000 years, you mentioned 5,000.
I can tell you that there's about 300 of them that predate the Council of Nicaea.
Well, within the first 1,000 years of Christianity,
I really don't. I know 300 predate the Council of Nicaea.
Less than 900 of those manuscripts are found. So
300
most of those manuscripts come after the first 1,000 years of Christianity.
It's impossibly wrong. But when we look at what we have prior to the Council of Nicaea, it lines up.
The 5,000 that you mentioned is for shock effect. Thousands of manuscripts. But you see, most of that are copies from very few manuscripts.
We have better adaptations of the New Testament than we have in any book from antiquity. And every single one of those manuscripts that predate the Council of Nicaea, where it is mentioned, it says that Jesus Christ was crucified. Clearly demonstrating.
Essentially, what you're saying is that my grandson wrote about me, and then within the first 1,000 years after what he wrote, you have 5 manuscripts, copies of that manuscript, and then 1,000 years after, you have 1,000 manuscripts from copies of my grandson, and you're saying that those 5,000 manuscripts prove what I said. No, it doesn't. It's not going to amount to that, sir. Most of the 5,000 come much later, and they are copies of the very few manuscripts that we have from within the first 1,000 years of Christianity.
Let me ask you a question.
Read these 2 books.
Yeah, that's Bart Ehrman. Yeah, the Bart Ehrman, the guy that's most attested events from antiquity is the crucifixion of Christ too, Kenny. Way to go.
Bart Ehrman is a student of Bruce Metzger, who wrote the book Corruption of the New Testament. Sure, go ahead, Eric.
Right. Yes, Kenny, did you know that Bart Ehrman says that the most attested to event from antiquity is the crucifixion of Christ?
We know he says that. He says that.
Yeah, that guy.
We know he says that. That's fine.
I've read these books thoroughly. I know exactly.
It doesn't. When we refer to someone, it doesn't mean that we have to accept everything that person says.
That's right.
You're use him as a source, though. But if you're going to say that he's a scholar and he's
sure. When you cite a scholar, so when you're writing a journal article, for example, and you're citing
that, but you're going to pick everything else.
You agree with everything that scholar says.
Here's my question. Out of all these, and I have that book too, Kenny. You know that. Where is that?
No, I see that you have a very good collection of books. I'm quite impressed.
Here. Look at I have gone through this book. I've had a field day with. Okay, stop. Let's go back to the question.
For endorsing my book, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. What was my question? It dealt with New Testament manuscripts. Okay. you keep saying that there's all kinds of variants and changes that have been made, and I would agree. There are all kinds of variants.
Hold on. Allow me to share my screen for a moment, right? Let me see if I can do this, because we're delving into the subject.
Be able to get something in here or not?
Now, this has to do with the subject that you're gonna raise right now. Hang on a minute. Let's see if I can do this. Application window.
In there that he was neither killed or crucified. Who's saying that? Oh, that's right. Muhammad said that. I'm sorry.
So am I sharing it? Can you see it?
I don't see it. It didn't pop up yet. Okay, there it is. Okay, so add to stream. All right. So
okay, so let's have a look. So this is my article that I wrote on the New Testament Greek manuscripts, right? So this is from the Allens, Barbara and Kurt Allen. I'm sure you know them.
Yep.
Basically the godfathers of, if you like, of textual criticism. So if you look at the table there, right? So this contains the list of manuscripts available for the New Testament, extant manuscripts. So if you look at the 2nd century there, you see P52 and another papyrus.
Mm-hmm.
1st century, absolutely no. 2nd century, those are the only 2 ones. Correct?
I can't really see it because it's really small on my screen. Is there any way that you can enlarge it?
Hang on, let me see. Hopefully it will. Oh no. Hang on. Let's see if I can magnify it. Yeah, right. There you are.
Okay.
So 2nd century, you only have 2 papyrus.
Okay.
Papyri, P52.
Right. You know why that is?
Right.
You know why that is?
So yeah, so that's the mid 2nd century.
I don't care why that is, but I'm going to write that down.
And then later, within the same century, what do you have? P32, P46. That's about it. So that's the first 2 centuries of Christianity, attestations for as far as extant Greek manuscripts are concerned. Those are the only ones that you have that can be validly that are
references that we have from the early church fathers referencing what is written in those manuscripts.
Sure, we're talking about the patristic sources, but as far as Greek manuscripts, extant manuscripts are concerned, and within the the early.
Are you going to answer that question, or are you just going to just try to?
The 3rd century, we only have
right by
4.
that.
So you only have 4 within the first half of the 3rd century. You have P64 and P67 and P66 or 5, I guess. P77 and 0189. That's it. So within the first 250 years of Christianity, how many do you have actually? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Less than 10, as I said. Less than 10. According to the criterion that you have put forward, namely that a source or a piece of writing or whatever that does not have tangible manuscript attestation within the first 200 years should be rejected. So the New Testament almost in its entirety should be rejected because we do not have manuscript attestations from the first 2 centuries.
Okay, I'm going to ask you just one more time. Do you know why we do not have early manuscript attestation? I mean, I'm just going to ask you that. I mean, I've asked you several times, and you keep dismissing the question.
Come again? Why do you not have it? Because most of Christianity were illiterate. That's why. That is why.
You believe that, yes?
It's not a matter of belief. That's a fact.
No, it is a matter of belief because it's simply not true.
Not only the Jewish community, but communities all over the world, 90% or more of people were illiterate. You know this. Less than 5%, less than 3 would be illiterate.
When we start looking at the early manuscript evidence for the New Testament, what was it written on?
Come again?
What were the first Gospels, the first New Testament manuscripts written on?
I don't know. 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 I don't animal skins?
No, they were not. Try again.
And what would that prove?
It would prove a lot. Go ahead, but it's very telling why you don't know the answer to this question, why you're trying to make this point.
Well, what is it? Papyrus?
Yeah.
No,
papyrus.
material was expensive.
Now let me ask you another question.
Papyrus and animal skin. These
No,
two.
it's not animal
were
skin.
very
It was
expensive.
papyrus. The earliest Christians were very poor. They were not able to.
Yeah, I know. The
They
material was very
weren't
expensive.
afford
The
vellum.
material
They had to
was very
write on
expensive. I
papyrus.
just
It was
mentioned
very
it.
cheap
I
at
just
the time.
mentioned it. You thought that I didn't know, and I just mentioned it
about
before
that.
you
How long do
mentioned it.
papyri?
I just
How long does
mentioned it before
papyrus
you
last?
mentioned it. No, animal skin and papyri were used in the
How long does
earliest.
papyrus last?
Papyri and animal skin were the earliest material used for Christian manuscripts. This is a fact of history. Why are you rejecting this? If you reject this,
rejecting
then
is what you're trying to do is you're trying to conflate the amount.
Do you reject the codices of Christianity?
Everything that I have to say gets interrupted.
No, do you reject the codices of Christianity?
The codexes that we possess? Of course not. But what I'm saying is when you
what are they written on? What are they written on?
Okay, let's
what are they written on?
Let's go to 1 minute increments. Let's go to 1 minute.
I want to do one. I just want to have a conversation, but every time I say something or try to make
Okay, so go ahead, Eric. You have 1 minute.
So I asked you a question. The majority of the early Christian writings were written on papyrus. There were some that were written on vellum. They were written on animal skins. This is true. But when you start making this argument and say, well, this is all the extant writing.
Why were you saying that?
Okay, guys, it's late. No, it's okay. We can.
Kenny, got a question real quick.
And I love this. I love these conversations. I love engaging you guys.
Eric, make his point.
No, it's okay, Kenny. I got to call a night because I got to get up early in the morning. I that's
a distraction also. I don't know why you said that I was wrong when you just stated that I was right. You just said it that it was papyri and animal skin. Yeah, these were the two materials first used. Why did you
you're trying to conflate, and this is just a dishonest form of argumentation is all it is.
Eric just contradict himself. You said one thing and said another. So you telling the truth or you lying? Which one is it?
That's not what
it was less than 2 minutes ago that you just stated that yes, papyri and vellum, animal skin.
Okay.
All right, and then you said before that you said
you have one.
I'm putting everyone on mute. Just all right. Look, let's take a deep breath. Eric, you're not speaking right now. I put everyone on mute. So, all right. So, alhamdulillah, I've been on since about 5:30, and I still have yet to break fast. So I need to break my fast. So let's go ahead and call it quits right now. I think we've had a good conversation. Alhamdulillah, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses everyone for their intention. That means Christians and Muslims alike. We're all trying to get to the same destination. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our God, our creator, our one and only God and creator, I pray that he opens up all of our doors to more understanding and more wisdom. And I thank everyone for listening. I don't mean to cut everyone off, but I think we've exasperated this point today. And Eric said he needed to go anyway. So, but yeah, it's been good having you on, Eric. I think, let's build bridges of understanding instead of walls of divisiveness. And if we are trying to do that as Christians and Muslims, we're going to have a better world all the way around. So all we can do is, as individuals, is do our part and try to bridge those gaps, inshallah, God willing. So may Allah bless everyone who's been watching and listening. I do ask you to subscribe, like, and share on the YouTube channels. Share the links with other people as we build the platform. I do encourage you to donate to the Patreon link. We've got some big things coming up. We have this coming Friday, we have a big interview coming up with Richard McKinney, who is a former Marine who planned to bomb a masjid. He wound up accepting Islam a number of weeks later and eventually became the president of the very masjid that he was trying to bomb. I've done 2 or 3 events with him, and he's going to be a special guest on Friday evening at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Friday, inshallah, God willing. So, Brother Ibn Anwar, thank you once again for sharing your knowledge. Brother Marshall, thank you for all the work that you do with the platform, alhamdulillah. So thank you, brother.
Yeah,
Ramadan.
Assalamualaikum.
Yeah. So we'll do it again, inshallah. So,
inshallah.
inshallah. So, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
Rahmatullahi.
salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's
Yeah.
amazing that he
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
yeah,
So,
parchment
yeah.
and
Yeah,
and parchment vellum.
I mean, so
Love that.
we'll just remember this, everyone who's listening, all the Muslims out there, dawah is deen. Dawah is deen. It's part of our obligation and our great opportunity as Muslims. Dawah is part of our deen, and knowledge is king. Alhamdulillah. We have to seek knowledge. Knowledge is power indeed. Dawah is deen, and knowledge is king. Let's be readers instead of repeaters. So let's study and engage ourselves in actual study and research from legitimate sources, not be biased in our approach. Let's look at all the angles, inshallah, God willing, and try to decipher what's the truth from falsehood. This is Kenny Bomer Live. Consider this TV where truth is made clear from falsehood, and I do bear witness that there's no God other than Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his final servant and the seal of our prophets. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.